You're lying still now, letting your eyes grow heavier. The world outside fades slowly, and we begin gently with a story few truly understand. The idea of mind control often sounds like science fiction, something from a bad movie. A shadowy villain pressing buttons, pulling levers inside the brain. But the truth, as always, is far more subtle and far older than most suspect. Mind control didn't begin in a lab. It began in temples. It began in courts of ancient kings and beneath cathedral ceilings. Long before electrodes in psychology textbooks, there were whispers ways to guide how people thought, felt, and behaved without them realizing. In ancient Egypt, priests used sound, scent, and ritual to shape belief. They knew that repetition when paired with emotion could shape memory, could shape loyalty, could shape obedience. In Greece, philosophers wrote of techne, the craft of persuasion, where words could mold souls. And in Rome, the crowd was controlled not by chains, but by bread and spectacle. Distract the people, give them entertainment, and you'll never have to raise a sword. The roots of control are not in brutality. They are in attention. And attention, when shaped carefully, becomes belief. By the time the printing press was invented, minds could be influenced across continents. Information became power. And with power came a new idea. What if you could make people believe not just what you said, but want to believe it? It wasn't called mind control then. It was called faith, or patriotism, or social order. Governments discovered that you didn't need to punish the disobedient if you could train them never to question you. By the 20th century, new tools had emerged. Psychology, advertising, group dynamics, and behavioral science all used, sometimes secretly, to test just how far a person could be led without force. And so, the foundations were laid. The early studies were quiet. Often, they began in universities, with rats in cages, with electric buttons, with words whispered over and over. Could behavior be shaped without awareness? Could thought itself be guided like a river, nudged gently in a different direction? The results were unnerving. Humans responded to the same patterns animals did. Reward and punishment, light and sound, peer pressure, repetition, authority. We were programmable, not perfectly, not always, but enough. That was enough. Governments began to fund research, some openly, some buried under layers of secrecy. Intelligence agencies studied how to break minds and how to rebuild them in ways more convenient to control. A mind, once open, could be filled with anything. But the most terrifying part wasn't what could be done to one person. It was what could be done to many. Mass psychology, crowd control, influence, not through force, but suggestion. Fear, pride, identity. The realization dawned. You could control people not by changing their minds, but by making them think they changed them on their own. They called it behavioral engineering, but it was just mind control in a prettier suit. By the time the television arrived in every home, the possibilities had multiplied. Visual cues, repeated slogans, background sounds that triggered emotion, messages delivered through smiling faces, repeated until they became truth, and people welcomed it. They craved it. They let the television in. They gave it their time, their attention, their trust. They let it talk to their children. Today, the tools have evolved. Algorithms now study what you see and what you ignore. Your likes, your pauses, your clicks, and based on those, they decide what you'll see next, what you'll want, what you'll fear, what you'll support, and most don't even notice. The origins of mind control were ancient, but now they are digital, invisible, seamless, no wires, no hypnotists, no glowing eyes or spirals, just suggestions, just ideas, just endless, gentle nudges in a direction you never chose. And yet here we are, being shaped, being softened, being steered. Not by a single villain in a dark room, but by systems, codes, incentives, and perhaps by our own desire for comfort. So lie back now, breathe in, and exhale slowly. You're safe. You're calm. And the secrets are just beginning. Operation Mockingbird. Media as a weapon. Part 2. 800 words. Breathe in slowly. Let your shoulders fall. Let the noise of your day melt into the dark. We're going deeper now. into a time when truth was not found but made, crafted behind closed doors, packaged like a product, and sold to the people through the voices they trusted most. This is the story of Operation Mockingbird. The year was 1948. The Cold War was beginning to boil. Governments were nervous, nations paranoid, and behind the curtain of diplomacy, something new was unfolding. The CIA, still in its infancy, knew one thing for sure: control the message, and you control the mind. So they reach out not to soldiers or spies, but to journalists, to editors, to television hosts and newspaper writers. Not to silence them, but to recruit them. You see, during a war of ideologies where no bullets are flying, but belief is everything, information becomes a weapon. And no weapon is more effective than one hidden in plain sight. This is what Operation Mockingbird was: a vast network of media insiders, quietly working with intelligence agencies. Their job? Shape the news, shape the stories, shape what millions of people would think without ever knowing it. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it touched nearly every major news outlet in the United States: magazines, newspapers, radio, and eventually, television. Entire careers were built on this quiet cooperation. Writers received their talking points from handlers, editors knew what not to publish, and when needed, entire stories were invented. Not because the journalists were evil, not because they wanted to deceive, but because they believed in something bigger. They believed it was for national security. And so the public trusted what they read, not knowing the words were edited by unseen hands. This was never about just facts. It was about framing. It was about deciding what was shown, how it was shown, and what was left out completely. A foreign government destabilizing? Blame it on communists. A protest at home? Minimize it. Or label it un-American. A government scandal? Push it to page 12. Or deny it happened at all. The beauty of the operation was its plausibility. The media always had mistakes, always had bias. But this was deliberate. And the deeper you go, the more you realize it wasn't just America. Versions of this happened across the world. In the UK, in the USSR, in France, in Latin America. Governments understood that the media could be more powerful than any law, any bullet, or any vote. Because if people believe something strongly enough, they'll defend it, even if it was never true. By the 1970s, cracks began to show. Investigative reporters grew suspicious. Senators asked questions. And in 1976, the Church Committee exposed what many feared. The CIA had paid and placed dozens, possibly hundreds of operatives in media positions. But by then, it was too late. The damage was done. The public's view of reality had been shaped for decades. And the operation? It didn't die. It just changed names, changed methods. Because the principle never changed. Control the story, and you control the people. Today, it's more subtle. Influencers, talk show hosts, algorithms that decide what headlines reach your screen. You think you choose your news, but often the news chooses you. And the tools are more advanced. They know what makes you click, what makes you share, what makes you angry, what makes you stay online. And they feed you stories, some true, some not, designed not to inform, but to influence. And you won't even realize it, because the voice sounds friendly. The image is polished. The tone is calm. But behind it, there may still be a mockingbird, a whisper from the past, echoing through your feed, telling you what to fear, what to want, what to believe. So now, as your body sinks deeper into sleep, you wonder how much of your mind is truly your own. The mockingbird sings softly, but its song is everywhere. Let that thought fade gently into the dark. Let your breath slow. Let your questions rest for now. We move forward soon to a time when experiments on the mind were no longer metaphors. In the next part, we'll walk quietly into MK Ultra and the forgotten trials of the human soul. But for now, just drift. The truth will wait. The forgotten experiments. The lights are dim now. Your body is still, and your mind is ready to wander. Wander into a chapter few speak of, whispered in courtrooms, buried in dusty files, and blurred in old footage that seems too strange to be real. This is the story of Project MK Ultra, a name that sounds like fiction but was very real. In the early 1950s, as the Cold War deepened, the US government faced a terrifying question. What if the enemy could control minds? What if soldiers could be turned without knowing? What if secrets could be extracted without torture? What if thoughts could be rewritten? And so they began their own search. The CIA, under a program known as MK Ultra, launched a sprawling secret campaign to find out if the human mind could be broken and rebuilt, not with kindness, not with care, but with chemicals, hypnosis, and silence. Dozens of sub-projects, hundreds of unwitting subjects, years of testing, all hidden from the public. They experimented in labs, in military bases, in hospitals, and sometimes in everyday clinics. They gave powerful drugs like LSD to people who had no idea what they were ingesting. They watched as personalities fractured, as time bent in the minds of the vulnerable. They observed, took notes, rarely helped. Some patients thought they were seeking therapy. Others believed they were part of harmless trials. Many never knew at all. One of the most infamous doctors, Ewan Cameron, believed he could erase illness by erasing identity. His techniques? Sensory deprivation, repetitive messages, electroshock. He called it depatterning, as if the human mind were a chalkboard to be wiped clean and then rewritten. But people were not chalkboards. Many who endured these experiments left broken, speechless, confused, hollow. Some never left at all. The stated goal? To create better interrogation methods, to resist foreign mind control. But beneath that, there was something darker, a hunger to possess the blueprint of thought itself, to know how to push a human soul into obedience, not through threat or violence, but through silence, confusion, and fear. At times, MK Ultra felt like a dream gone wrong, doctors playing God, governments funding madness in the name of patriotism. And the results? They were inconsistent, unreliable, often disastrous. But the insights gained didn't disappear. They became lessons, methods, seeds planted in the soil of future technologies. By the 1970s, the program was unraveling. Whistleblowers stepped forward. Lawsuits were filed. Congress began asking questions. And in 1975, a public report confirmed what many had feared. The U.S. government had experimented on its own people, without consent, without apology, and often without mercy. The name MK Ultra became public, but many details hundreds of thousands of pages had already been destroyed. The full truth? Gone, but the echoes remain. Today, people look at the internet, at screens filled with targeted suggestions, endless scrolling, infinite distraction, and they wonder, are we still being experimented on? Not in the same way. Not in dark clinics with syringes and scripts, but perhaps in brighter rooms with cleaner logos, with terms and conditions we don't read. Maybe the tools are different now. Maybe they don't need to erase your identity anymore because they can slowly, subtly reshape it through data, through design, through decisions made for you before you've even had a chance to choose. MK Ultra was never just a project. It was a warning, a signal that even the best minds, the most powerful governments, can be tempted not to understand us, but to own us. And once you've been owned, once your thoughts are no longer fully your own, how do you know what's real anymore? So breathe in slowly. Let that thought settle. You are not in a lab. You are not a test subject. You are safe. But the story is still unfolding. And in the next part, we'll look not at chemicals or cages, but at something far more powerful. Fear, how it's crafted, how it spreads, and how it controls you without ever needing a chain. Let the lights dim deeper. Let your muscles grow heavier. The experiment is over, but the effects might still be with us. How fear is engineered. Let the quiet settle. Feel your chest rise and fall. The world is still, but somewhere beneath headlines and hashtags, fear is moving. Not natural fear, the kind that warns us of danger, like the sudden hiss of a snake or the crackle of a flame. No, this fear is different. This fear is crafted, engineered. You see, fear is one of the most powerful tools known to man. And those in power have known this for centuries, not just because fear protects, but because fear controls. When you are afraid, truly afraid, your body changes, your breathing shortens, your decisions become reactive, your thoughts narrow to a single point: survival. And a fearful mind is predictable, vulnerable, obedient. This is why governments across eras, across continents have learned to shape fear like an artist shapes clay. They don't need to create danger. They only need to suggest it. Let's begin with something simple: language. A word can change the shape of fear. Call it a virus and people worry. Call it a foreign virus and people panic. Add a few numbers, a rising graph, an unseen threat, and watch as calm turns to chaos. Next, consider imagery. One photograph of an explosion, a single shot of an empty supermarket shelf, a dramatic clip of someone coughing in a hallway. No context. No full story. Just emotion. That's enough to trigger a reaction, because fear doesn't wait for proof. It only needs a feeling. Governments and media outlets, sometimes knowingly, sometimes not, use this rhythm: problem, panic, promise. First, introduce a threat, real or imagined. Next, stir it, amplify it, give it names, statistics, faces, let people talk about it, let them become afraid, and then offer a solution: a new law, a new leader, a surveillance measure, a curfew, a war. And the people, shaken and anxious, accept it, even if they never would have accepted it before. That's the brilliance of engineered fear. It makes you choose your own control. You welcome it, thank it, call it protection. But it wasn't protection, it was a bargain. Safety in exchange for freedom. This is why fear is not just an emotion, it's a system. And it's not always loud. Sometimes fear is quiet, a subtle warning, a whispered threat, a look, a law you don't quite understand, but are too tired to question. And it doesn't always come from dictators. It can come from democracies, from spokespeople, from experts with kind eyes and serious voices. Because fear, when used carefully, doesn't look like tyranny. It looks like guidance. Let's take a brief journey through history. In the 1930s, Germans were made to fear the enemy within: Jews, artists, intellectuals. Their fear led to compliance, and then to catastrophe. In the US, during the 1950s, the fear of communism gripped the country. It didn't matter if you were innocent. A single accusation could ruin your life. After 9/11s, fear flooded the modern world. We handed over privacy, rights, and scrutiny in exchange for security. And every time the same words were used: we're doing this to keep you safe. But safety from what? From each other? From ourselves? From invisible forces that may never have existed? The brilliance of engineered fear is that it never ends. When one threat fades, a new one rises. Sometimes a virus, sometimes a protest, sometimes a story that spreads faster than truth. Because fear has one job: to keep you looking outward so you never question what's happening inside your home, inside your country, inside your own mind. When you live in fear long enough, you forget what peace feels like. You mistake numbness for safety, silence for truth, and you begin to believe that fear is normal, but it isn't. Fear, when it's real, is useful. Fear, when it's manufactured, is a prison without bars. So now, breathe in. Let that breath remind you you are still here, still free, still thinking. And as you sink deeper into calm, let the question sit gently beside you. What fears have been planted in your mind that were never really yours? The next part of our journey will take us to the idea of consent that isn't truly free, not forced, but guided. Because sometimes we don't just accept fear, we accept ideas, narratives, and choices because we've been led to believe they were ours. That is the art of manufactured consent. But for now, let fear loosen its grip. Let your chest rise, soft and slow. You are safe. You are watching from the outside. And the story continues soon. Manufactured consent. Close your eyes, let your breathing settle, and listen closely. Not to the loud voices, not to the debates, not to the headlines that scream for your attention. Listen to what isn't said, to what isn't questioned. This is the quiet power of manufactured consent. Coined by Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman, this term doesn't describe dictatorship. It doesn't involve chains or threats. It involves something softer, more elegant, more invisible. It describes a world where you agree to what the powerful want without ever realizing you were guided. Imagine walking into a restaurant. You're given a menu, 3 choices. You pick one, you feel free, you feel like it was your decision. But what if the menu was designed in a boardroom? What if the other dishes were never shown? What if every item came from the same kitchen? Even though they looked different, you still chose. But your choice was never really free. This is the essence of manufactured consent. It's not about hiding the truth entirely. It's about curating the truth, framing it, softening it, spinning it. It's about giving you the illusion of choice while steering you toward a predetermined answer. You'll hear this in the words used on the news. Experts say, sources confirm, there's only one responsible path forward. You'll see it in election cycles. Different candidates, different slogans, but funded by the same interests. You'll feel it in entertainment, movies, shows, documentaries, all subtly reinforcing a worldview that keeps you content or distracted. It's not a conspiracy, it's a system, a set of incentives, where those who challenge the narrative get less airtime, less funding, less reach, and those who stay within the lines, they thrive. So what happens to a society raised on this? People begin to echo what they hear, not because they're brainwashed, but because they're tired of complexity, tired of contradiction, tired of asking questions that only bring discomfort. So they accept the easiest story, and slowly their worldview narrows. Of course this war is necessary. Of course this candidate is dangerous. Of course this product makes life better. Of course these people are wrong. Of course we're the good guys. Consent isn't forced. It's manufactured. And once it is, the rest is easy. People police themselves, silence each other, cancel dissent, not because they're cruel, but because they believe they're right. And what's more dangerous than a population that does the bidding of power? While believing it's their own idea, it's effective, it's elegant, and it's invisible. Here's an example. A government wants to go to war, but the people don't support it. So the media reports on a threat, a distant land, a dangerous regime. Maybe there's a leaked video, a photo, a shaky quote. Over time, the people grow uneasy. The story builds, the tension rises. Then comes a call for action. By now, the people don't just accept it. They demand it because they feel afraid. They feel morally compelled. They feel like they came to the decision themselves. They didn't. They were led. Step by step, image by image, headline by headline. This doesn't just happen in war. It happens in economics, in healthcare, in education, in tech, in the very way we define progress. When companies shape what news you see, when politicians shape what words you use, when influencers shape what you care about, your choices become less about freedom and more about direction. Guided, subtle, paced, until you no longer ask, is this the truth? But instead, which version of the truth do I like more? So as you lie there, blanket wrapped around you, let this sink in. You are not weak. You are not foolish. But you are human. And humans are easily nudged. And when the world is too loud, too fast, too complex, we often reach for the simplest answer. And that is where consent is shaped. So now, breathe. Let the noise fall away. You don't have to believe everything. You don't have to agree with the menu. You are allowed to pause, to wonder, to ask, who benefits from what I believe? Because manufactured consent isn't just about headlines. It's about habits, thoughts, silences. And as we move forward, we'll look at the next tool, controlled opposition, when even your resistance is part of the plan. But for now, let your thoughts drift, let your chest rise and fall. Let the silence speak, and rest in the knowing you are beginning to see the script. Controlled opposition, you're calm now. The noise of the world has softened, but behind the curtain, a new kind of performance is about to begin. Let's talk about controlled opposition. It sounds like a contradiction. Why would a government, a system, or a corporation create its own enemy? Why would power create resistance? The answer is simple: to control it. See, real resistance is unpredictable. It spreads, it exposes, it unites. But controlled resistance? It makes noise without shaking the walls. It yells without aiming. And it always, always leads the crowd in circles. Here's how it works. Imagine people are waking up. They're angry. They're starting to see the cracks in the story they've been fed. So what does the system do? It gives them something to yell at. It creates a leader, a protest, a movement, one that looks rebellious, sounds brave, feels righteous. But beneath the slogans and fury, it's funded, guided, monitored, because if you control the opposition, you control how far the rebellion goes. You decide which questions are asked and which truths remain buried. In politics, this is everywhere. Left and right, red and blue, the illusion of choice, two sides yelling, two armies clashing. But when the dust settles, the laws remain the same. The rich get richer, the cameras move on. And the people, they feel like they tried. They feel like they voted. They feel like they fought. But they were marching in a maze built just for them. Controlled opposition isn't always big. Sometimes it's subtle. A whistleblower who leaks just enough. An activist who speaks but never acts. A journalist who digs but never publishes. Sometimes it's not even a person. It's a hashtag, a meme, a trending topic that burns hot for a day and then disappears. It's a pressure valve, a way to let the public vent without changing anything real. Think of it this way. If people are going to rebel, wouldn't it be safer to let them do it in a way you can predict? Better yet, a way you can profit from. Now, this doesn't mean everyone in the opposition is fake. Many are real, angry, brave, sincere. But the system is smart. It doesn't need to silence all dissent. It only needs to amplify the wrong kind. It lifts up the voices that stir emotion, but not action. It promotes movements that divide, but don't heal. It funds leaders who talk loud, but never threaten real power. And all the while, the people watching at home think, see, at least someone's doing something. But nothing changes, because controlled opposition doesn't challenge the game, it just changes the jersey. This tactic goes far back. In empires, in revolutions, even in religion. Whenever the people grow restless, the system offers them a hero, a symbol, a cause, something to believe in that leads them exactly where power wants them to go. And you are meant to feel part of it. You are meant to cheer, to tweet, to buy the shirt, to attend the march. Because if you're busy doing that, you're not asking deeper questions. You're not organizing something genuine. You're not turning off the screen. You're not talking to the people next door. You're not looking within. Controlled opposition keeps the rebellion on a leash. It lets you bark, but never bite. So now, let your eyes soften. Let the shouting fade. Ask yourself gently, who are the voices I follow? Who gave them the mic? Who funds their message? Who benefits when I'm angry? But powerless? These aren't easy questions. But asking them is the first act of true resistance. In the next part, we explore how the system keeps you off balance, not with noise, but with distraction. Because when your attention is split 100 ways, you forget to notice the one thing that matters: who is watching you. But for now, you are here, still aware. You don't need to fight yet. You only need to see. And what you're seeing is the machinery behind the curtain. The rebellion was never free, but your mind still can be the science of distraction. Take a breath, a slow one, in and out. Let the silence return to your thoughts. You've looked behind the curtain. You've seen how resistance can be managed. But now we look at something even more powerful: distraction. It doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It doesn't even try to convince you. It just keeps you busy. You've probably felt it. The constant buzzing, the endless scrolling, the news alerts, the trending stories, the viral clips. There's always something new, always something to see, to feel, to worry about. And just when you start to focus on something real, a new distraction arrives. By design. Because distraction isn't an accident in modern life, it's a strategy. A system built to divide your attention into 1,000 little pieces. And when your attention is divided, you can't think deeply, you can't act clearly, you can't question fully. Governments have always used distraction. In ancient Rome, it was bread and circuses. Keep the people fed, keep them entertained, and they won't ask why the empire is crumbling. In modern times, it's more subtle. It's not just television or sports or celebrity gossip. It's your phone, your notifications, your curated feed, your suggested video. It's outrage over something small. While something big happens quietly in the background, you might hear about a scandal just in time to miss a major law being passed. You might spend hours debating a tweet while wealth is transferred silently, billions at a time. This isn't just distraction, it's redirection. And it works because your mind is wired to react to novelty, to fear, to pleasure, to conflict. And the people in power know this. That's why your screen is designed to hold you, to keep you jumping from topic to topic, from one crisis to another, never long enough to ask, wait, what's really going on here? Let's take a step back. Think about how much time you've spent today reacting, responding to messages, scrolling through noise, clicking without thinking, watching, consuming. That's not your fault. It's the system. It rewards speed, punishes depth, and tells you that being informed means seeing everything, even if you understand nothing. Because the truth is, distraction is more useful than censorship. If they silence you, you might notice. You might resist. But if they flood your senses, you never know what you missed. And that's the key. You're not supposed to focus. You're supposed to drift from one emotional spike to another, excited, angry, anxious, exhausted. So when it comes time to think clearly, to act, to decide, you're too tired, too overwhelmed, too numb. That's when power becomes permanent. When nobody has the energy to care anymore. And the scary part, you get used to it. You begin to need the noise, the refresh, the updates. Stillness becomes uncomfortable. Silence becomes unfamiliar. Thinking becomes rare. And without stillness, you cannot rebel. You cannot reflect. You cannot see the full picture. So now, here you are, wrapped in quiet, breathing slowly, letting go of the flood, and finally, noticing. The system has no need to lie to you, not when it can just distract you. Because truth doesn't disappear. It just gets buried under 1,000 headlines. So how do you reclaim your mind? You pause. You step outside the stream. You sit with one thought long enough for it to matter. That is your power. Not outrage, not speed, but depth. And in the depth, you begin to see the shapes behind the fog, the story behind the noise, the patterns behind the panic. In the next part, we'll step into the world of censorship by design, where information doesn't just disappear, it's filtered. Not by force, but by algorithm, by silence, by omission. But for now, just let this truth hold you. You don't have to chase every headline. You don't have to know everything. You only have to notice what they don't want you to see. Censorship by design. Now that your breath is slow and your mind is still, let's look at something that doesn't shout, doesn't burn books, doesn't lock up dissenters. It simply removes visibility. This is censorship by design. In the past, censorship was obvious. A dictator banned a book, a government burned letters, a journalist was silenced. But now, censorship is quiet. polite, almost invisible. You post something, it disappears. No warning, no explanation, or worse. It stays up, but no one sees it. No likes, no shares, just silence. It's not always a ban, it's suppression. A tweak in the algorithm, a flag that lowers visibility, a keyword that auto-filters your words into the void. You're not censored because you're wrong. You're censored because you're off narrative. Governments don't need to directly control speech anymore. They have help. Tech companies, private platforms that shape the flow of truth, and since they're private, they're not held to the same rules. They can say, this isn't censorship, it's community safety. It's preventing misinformation. It's for your protection. But who defines misinformation? Who decides what's harmful? Often, it's not you. And when enough voices are quietly hidden, shadow banned, deprioritized, it's as if they were never there. That's the genius of modern censorship. It doesn't need violence. It only needs silence. And once silence becomes normal, truth becomes whatever is most visible. And what's most visible is what's most profitable, most predictable, most compliant. Now pause. Ask yourself, how many opinions have you not heard, not because they were wrong, but because they were never shown to you? Censorship today is not just a wall. It's a filter, a lens that only lets in what fits the agenda. And like all good lenses, you don't even notice it's there. So now, lie back, eyes closed. Know that silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's design. And as we continue, we'll open the door to something equally quiet, but far more personal. Surveillance. How watching you became normal, how privacy became a myth, and how you're being trained to be comfortable with being watched. But first, let your mind rest. Let the thought settle. What have you never seen? Because someone didn't want you to. Surveillance normalization, lie back now. You're not being watched here. But outside, that's a different story. Once upon a time, surveillance meant suspicion, a wiretap, a man in a dark car, a camera hidden in a ceiling tile. But now, surveillance is everywhere, and it's been normalized. You carry it in your pocket, you speak to it, you feed it your schedule, your location, your preferences, and it rewards you with convenience. You wear it on your wrist, you let it track your steps, your sleep, even your heartbeat, and it rewards you with motivation. You scroll, you like, you share, and it learns. Every click is a confession, every pause a whisper, every choice a signature. But you don't notice, because this isn't surveillance through fear. This is surveillance through design. They never had to force you. You accepted it. You welcomed it. Because it came with benefits, faster service, better ads, smarter homes. But here's the quiet truth. Convenience was the bait, and your privacy was the cost. You're being watched, not just by governments, but by corporations, by devices, by systems designed to know more about you than you know about yourself. And what they do with that data, you may never know. But it's not just about ads. It's about behavior. When they know what you fear, what you love, what you'll click, they don't just observe you. They begin to shape you. And worse, you begin to behave differently, more careful, less bold, more compliant. Because deep down, you remember that someone is watching. And surveillance, when normalized, does something sinister. It changes who you are. It quiets rebellion. It discourages thought. It rewards conformity. And just like that, you're not free. Not truly. So lie back now. Let the glow of the screens fade. Let the watchers blink out. You are not your data. You are not your history. You are not your digital trail. You are still human, still sovereign, still capable of closing the window and opening your eyes. Next, we'll enter the world of predictive policing, where technology doesn't just track the past, it prejudges the future. But for now, let the surveillance go silent and rest in the space they cannot reach. The rise of predictive policing. You're calm now, still, but the world outside isn't sleeping, it's calculating. Welcome to the age of predictive policing, where data doesn't just describe crime, it predicts it. At least that's the promise. Police departments across the world now use algorithms, software that analyzes past crimes, hotspots, demographics, patterns of behavior, and then says, go here, watch this, arrest them. Sounds futuristic, efficient, maybe even helpful. But here's what they don't tell you. The future it predicts is based entirely on the past. And the past is filled with bias, with unequal arrests, with systemic prejudice. So when you feed that into a machine, the output isn't objective. It's amplified injustice, packaged as math. A neighborhood once labeled high risk, it stays that way, even if nothing has changed. A person arrested once, even if innocent, is flagged forever. The result? Communities are over-policed, not because of current behavior, but because of historical shadows. It's not about what you do, it's about what a machine thinks you might do. And there's no appeal, no trial, no explanation, because the algorithm doesn't have to explain itself. It's protected, sealed, private. So people are questioned, followed, watched, not because they committed a crime, but because a system saw a pattern. But patterns are not people. And prediction is not proof. This is where things get dangerous. We start treating potential as evidence. We start treating data points as destiny. And slowly, we begin to forget that freedom includes risk. That real justice isn't clean or quick. It's messy, human, nuanced. Predictive policing offers the illusion of safety, but it often just deepens surveillance. And those most affected are rarely the ones who built the system. So now, breathe again. You are not a statistic, not a trend, not a threat because a machine says so. You are a whole person, with context, with choice, with dignity. In the next section, we'll look deeper at how psychology itself is used, weaponized psychology, to shape behavior, not through law, but through instinct. But for now, let the future rest, and let your humanity remain untouched by the predictions of code. You are not predictable, you are not pre-written, you are still free. Weaponized psychology. Take another breath. Feel the silence return. Now, we leave algorithms behind and step into something older, something softer, something more dangerous. Your own mind. This is weaponized psychology, not how people heal, but how they're shaped, without consent, without awareness. You've probably seen it, you just didn't know its name. It starts with research. Noble, clinical, academic, psychologists studying how people behave, how they choose, how they obey. But over time, those studies weren't just for learning, they were for leveraging. How do you get someone to agree to something they'd normally reject? How do you sell more? Win elections? Silence dissent? The answers were in psychology. Techniques from therapy, turned into tools of manipulation, take operant conditioning, reward someone for obedience, punish them for resistance. Eventually, they'll stop questioning and call it free will or learned helplessness, where people exposed to enough failure stop trying to escape. They begin to believe their suffering is normal, that change is impossible. What better way to keep people quiet? Then there's social proof, the instinct to follow the crowd. When everyone seems to agree, you don't want to be the outlier. You silence your doubt. You conform. And the powerful, they know this. They stage agreement, promote consensus, suppress dissent. You think, if no one else is worried, maybe I'm wrong. But sometimes you're the only one seeing clearly. Even fear, as we've seen, is psychological. It's primal, hardwired. And when triggered repeatedly, it makes you obedient. You'll do almost anything if you're scared enough. Governments and corporations alike use these insights. They design environments to shape choices. They study attention to guide action. Not always through lies, sometimes through architecture. The layout of a website, the timing of a news cycle, the placement of a camera, even the color of a button. All these things affect behavior. And they know it. The line between persuasion and manipulation, it's thin and often invisible, because when psychology is used without ethics, it becomes a weapon, and the battlefield is your mind. So now, lie still. You're not being tested, you're not being studied, you're simply becoming aware. aware that influence is everywhere, and awareness is your shield. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into the techniques that influence masses without a word, behavioral nudging at scale. But for now, let your mind relax. You are not a puppet. You are a person, and you can still see the strings. Behavioral nudging at scale. Close your eyes. The world grows quieter, but behind that quiet, someone is steering. This is behavioral nudging at scale. It's not force, not fear, not even persuasion. It's a subtle push, a gentle guide, an invisible finger pointing you in a chosen direction. Imagine standing in front of two doors. One says, donate. The other says, maybe later. But donate is bigger, brighter, highlighted. You didn't choose that design, but it shaped your choice. Now scale that up to millions of people, hundreds of apps, government websites, school systems, healthcare portals, tiny nudges built into design, into flow, into routine. Behavioral economics called it choice architecture. But government saw more: control without resistance, a well-placed form, a pop-up at the right second, a social comparison. You use more energy than your neighbors. You haven't voted yet others have. You're the last one who hasn't accepted the policy. No commands, just quiet nudges. And they work. They work because we're creatures of habit. We go with defaults. We follow norms. We avoid friction. And nudges, they make one path easier than another. Soon, you're walking it. You don't even know why. That's the beauty of nudging. And the danger, because when used with care, it helps. It increases organ donations, encourages savings, improves health. But in the wrong hands, it shapes obedience, normalizes surveillance, silences risk-taking. And you think you've chosen freely, but the choice was arranged. So now, rest. Not all nudges are evil, but all nudges deserve awareness. In the next part, we'll step further into the illusion that guides everything: free will, and whether it still exists in the world we've built. The myth of free will lie deeper now. Float in stillness and ask the question that haunts every quiet mind. Do I really have free will? From the moment we wake, we make choices. What to wear, what to eat, what to think. But behind those choices are influences, messages, memories, algorithms, advertisements, social norms, childhood rules. We think we are steering the ship, but often we're just riding the current. We're told we're free, but every environment we enter has been designed. Stores place items at eye level. Apps show you only certain options. News cycles present a narrow spectrum, and you choose from what you were shown, not from everything. And then there's timing. You think of something, then see an ad, you feel an urge, then get a notification. The line between thought and suggestion becomes blurry. And when you don't question it, you call it instinct. But what if it was placed there? What if much of what we believe is reaction, not reflection? Free will becomes a myth when options are shaped, when consent is engineered, when comfort becomes a cage. But here's the hope. Awareness is resistance. The moment you notice the game, you begin to change the rules. So lie still. You are not trapped. But you must learn to pause, to question, to slow down before reacting. Because freedom is not in options, it's in presence. And in the next part, we'll see how even the truth we cling to can be revised before our very eyes. Welcome to deepfake democracies. Deepfake democracies. What if you saw a video of your leader saying something shocking? And what if it was never real? Welcome to deepfake democracies, where truth wears a mask and lies walk freely in daylight. A deepfake is a synthetic media file, a fake face, a fake voice, so real you can't tell the difference. And now anyone can make one. With enough data, a voice can be cloned, a face can be animated, an entire speech manufactured. What does this mean for democracy? It means trust is under attack. You see a confession, a scandal, an outburst, you react, you vote, you protest, but it wasn't real. It was code. And by the time the truth comes out, it doesn't matter. the damage is done. Deepfakes don't just lie. They destroy trust in truth itself. Suddenly, no one believes anything. Even the real videos, even the genuine words. Doubt becomes a weapon. And once doubt is everywhere, democracy collapses quietly. Because if nothing is real, then nothing matters. The public disengages, people stop caring, and into that apathy, power grows. So what can we do? First, pause before reacting. Second, demand proof beyond video. Third, understand the stakes. Technology moves fast, but truth is slow. And when democracy rests on perception, perception becomes the target. So lie back now. Know that truth is still real, but harder to find, and worth protecting. In the next part, we'll uncover the hidden system that rewards obedience, the architecture of obedience, and how you've been building it without even knowing. The architecture of obedience. You're calm again, breathing soft, but beneath you, something is being built. It's not made of steel or stone. It doesn't tower in the skyline, but it holds you, guides you, shapes you. This is the architecture of obedience, and you've lived inside it your whole life. You see, control doesn't always come from orders. It comes from design. When cities are laid out to discourage gathering, when benches are curved to prevent sleeping, when cameras are placed not just to record, but to remind. Every space you enter says something. Move here. Don't stay long. Keep walking. Be watched. And eventually, you listen. But it's not just physical. Digital spaces do this too. Pop-ups, accept buttons, notifications that lure you back, captures that test you like a suspect. You're not forced to obey, but you're nudged, prompted, conditioned. You comply not because you're weak, but because resistance is exhausting. The architecture doesn't yell. It whispers, it's easier if you just follow. And once you begin to follow, you stop noticing the walls. That's how obedience is built. One quiet, compliant choice at a time, until control feels natural, like gravity, unseen but always present. And when enough people follow, obedience becomes culture. We police each other, correct each other, shame those who step out of line. The result? Control without a dictator, censorship without a law, obedience as self-preservation. So now, lie still. You're not a failure for complying. You're not broken, you're human. But now you see the walls. Now you can choose which ones to lean on and which to dismantle. In the next part, we'll look at how the absurd becomes normal when it's repeated long enough. This is normalizing the absurd. Normalizing the absurd, at first, it feels wrong. You see something unjust, strange, ridiculous, you blink, you flinch, you think that can't be real. But then it happens again, and again, and again, until it is real. This is normalizing the absurd, and it's one of the oldest tools of power. Here's how it works. You introduce something extreme, a policy, a law, a behavior. At first, the public rejects it, loudly, but over time, the shock fades. The headlines change. A new scandal rises, and the absurd stays. Eventually, people stop fighting. They adjust. They call it just how things are. And the system, it smiles. Because it never needed approval, only acceptance. We've seen this in war, in surveillance, in inequality, in cruelty. Things once unthinkable are now daily life. Why? Because when you repeat the absurd, it becomes familiar. And the brain is wired to accept what feels familiar. Even if it's wrong, even if it's dangerous, even if it breaks your heart. This is why memes, jokes, satire are double-edged swords. They expose truth, but they also desensitize. You laugh at the absurd, then you scroll, then you forget. And forgetting is the final step of normalization. So now, breathe. Ask yourself, what have I accepted? Simply because I was too tired to question it. You're not to blame. You were overwhelmed. But now, you're aware. And awareness is resistance. Next, we step into the technique used to bring you back into control, hoovering. When the system pretends to love you, just long enough to pull you back, hoovering, imagine you've walked away. You've seen through the lies, You've said enough, but suddenly the voice you escaped turned sweet. I've changed. I care. You're important to me. Come back. That's not love. That's hoovering, a term from psychology named after a vacuum cleaner because it sucks you back in. Governments do it, corporations do it, toxic systems do it. Here's how. You rebel, you resist, you leave their story. So they change tone. They offer a discount, an apology, a new leader, a reform, a rebrand, but nothing fundamental shifts. Only the mask. Because hoovering isn't about fixing the system, it's about regaining control. They tell you what you want to hear, just long enough for you to stop fighting. And then they continue. The pattern restarts. Control, abuse, escape, charm, repeat. Hoovering works because it plays on your hopes, your compassion, your exhaustion. You want to believe they've changed. You want peace. You want to rest. But peace without truth is just silence in disguise. So now, lie back. You are not cruel for walking away. You are not broken for being fooled. You are healing. The next part will explore how your thoughts can hold two truths at once and how systems exploit that. This is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. Your eyes are heavy now. Your breath is slow. And your mind is holding two ideas. Both feel true, but they can't exist together. This is cognitive dissonance, a quiet war inside your head, where beliefs collide, where logic and loyalty don't agree, where the truth feels uncomfortable. Imagine believing your country values freedom, but watching it silence voices. Imagine trusting a leader, then hearing their lie and still defending them. Your brain doesn't like conflict. It wants harmony. So it finds ways to explain away the tension. They didn't mean it. It's for the greater good. This time is different. The system counts on that. It knows you want to feel consistent, honorable, certain. So it offers justifications. It spins facts, rewrites motives, creates enemies. So you'll stay even when something deep inside tells you it's wrong. This is how powerful structures survive. They don't need to convince everyone. They just need to confuse you long enough to stop you from acting. And that confusion is not weakness. It means you're thinking. It means you care. So lie still, notice the tension, welcome it, because dissonance is not failure, it's the beginning of clarity. In the next part, we'll look at something stranger, mirror neurons, and how your brain, without your permission, feels what others feel, and how that power can be used against you. Exploiting mirror neurons, you see someone cry and feel it in your chest. You watch someone win and feel the joy as if it were your own. Why? Because of mirror neurons. Tiny parts of your brain that let you experience what others do. It's how humans learn empathy, how we built relationships, how we raise children. But this beautiful system can be exploited. Advertisers know it. Filmmakers know it. Governments know it. Show a child suffering, you'll act. Show a happy family using a product, you'll want it. Show a person panicking, and your body mimics their fear. Without asking, without logic, just emotion. This is why media is so powerful. Images don't just inform, they transform you, subtly, biologically. Mirror neurons blur the line between me and them. And power loves that, because if they can control what you see, they control how you feel. And if they can control how you feel, they can shape what you do. It's not a conspiracy. It's neurology. It's nature weaponized. So what can you do? Step back. Notice when your body responds. Ask yourself, is this my emotion or something I was made to feel? That pause, that breath, that is your return to freedom. Next, we'll explore how systems use empathy itself, not to unite, but to manipulate. This is exploiting empathy. Exploiting empathy. You care. That's your strength. Your heart opens easily. You feel for others, even strangers. But power sees that as a lever. This is exploiting empathy. When your kindness is used, not for healing, but for control. You see a refugee, a victim, a soldier's widow. Your heart aches. You want to help. You support the cause. But sometimes that story was crafted. not to inspire compassion, but to justify action. War, surveillance, censorship, all wrapped in a face that makes you feel something. If you don't support this, you don't care. If you question this, you're cruel. If you hesitate, you're the problem. And so empathy becomes a trap. You feel, so you don't think. You act without asking who benefits. The system loves that because it doesn't need your belief. It only needs your emotion. And empathy is easier to manipulate than logic. You can't fact check a feeling. So what now? Don't stop caring. Don't close your heart. Just ask, what comes next after this feeling? Am I helping or being hurted? Let your compassion stay pure, not performative, not reactive. You can feel deeply and still think clearly. In the next part, we'll explore how systems don't just make you care, they make you feel like you owe them. This is creating a sense of obligation. Creating a sense of obligation, you've been helped, protected, given safety, security, maybe even hope. And now you feel you owe them. This is creating a sense of obligation. It begins with favors, support, a gesture that looks generous, a free vaccine, a stimulus check, a public service. You didn't ask, but it was given, and now they remind you of it. We did this for you. We kept you safe. You owe us your trust. The more they remind you, the more you hesitate to question them. Because how can you bite the hand that fed you? How can you resist someone who once helped you survive? But here's the truth. Help with strings isn't help. It's leverage. You don't owe your obedience for clean water, for functioning roads, for not being harmed. Those are rights, not favors. But when help is framed as a gift, it becomes a debt. And debt becomes silence. That's the trick. It's not chains. It's gratitude weaponized. And over time, the story rewrites itself. They gave you freedom. They gave you peace. They gave you opportunity. And you owe them your silence, your loyalty, your vote. But the truth is, you were always entitled to dignity, to fairness, to a voice. So breathe now. Be thankful, but be clear. Gratitude is beautiful, but it must never be forced. And your rights are not debts. Next, we explore how the illusion of unity is used to divide. This is the tactic of divide and conquer. Divide and conquer tactics. Throughout history, rulers feared one thing most, a united people. Because unity is powerful, unstoppable, demanding. So how do you stop it? You divide them. And then you conquer. This tactic is ancient, but still alive. More subtle, more modern. It works like this. You highlight differences: race, religion, region, gender, class, belief. Then you amplify them. You tell Group A that Group B is the threat. You tell Group B that Group A has the power. You tell both sides. The real enemy is each other. And while they argue, fight, cancel, rage, you pass laws. You shift money, you tighten control, all unnoticed. Because the people are distracted, divided, defensive. It happens in politics, left versus right. In communities, you're either with us or against us. Even in families, you're not like us anymore. But here's the truth. Most people want the same things: safety, kindness, opportunity, freedom. It's the illusion of difference that drives the wedge. And that illusion is profitable. Media thrives on it. Politicians rely on it. Corporations use it to segment and sell. Because a divided public doesn't ask who's controlling all of us. So now, breathe. See past the labels, past the shouting. Look at the strings above. And realize the real power is not in choosing a side. It's in stepping back and seeing the game. Next, we'll explore how even our instincts toward authority can be turned against us. This is authority bias. Authority bias. Someone in a lab coat, a flag pin, a podium, a deep, steady voice. You hear them and you trust them. This is authority bias, a natural instinct wired into us from childhood, parents, teachers, leaders. We're trained to obey those in charge. And often it helps. It keeps us safe, efficient, orderly. But this instinct can be exploited because when someone looks authoritative, we stop questioning. We assume they're right. We assume they know more. We follow even when we shouldn't, even when they're lying. This bias shows up in experiments. The famous Milgram study where people shock strangers just because a man in a lab coat told them to. It shows up in war. When soldiers follow unjust orders, in medicine, when harmful drugs are promoted by experts, and in politics, when leaders label dissent as dangerous, you're told, trust the process, trust the experts, don't ask questions. But trust without accountability is not wisdom, it's obedience. So what do? You slow down. You ask, who gave them that authority? Who benefits from me believing them? Because real authority doesn't silence you. It invites your questions. So now, lie still, let go of the uniforms, the titles, the polished smiles, and remember, you can respect knowledge without surrendering your voice. Next, we explore the next escape tactic of systems, scapegoating, where blame is placed so power stays clean. Scapegoating, when the system fails, when things go wrong, when the people grow restless, it looks for a target, a distraction, a sacrifice. This is scapegoating, and it's as old as power itself. A single person, a group, a symbol, blamed for everything, not because they caused it, but because they're convenient. They become the outlet for anger, the shield for guilt, the excuse for injustice. They're the reason we're poor. They're corrupting our values. They're the real enemy. And while the crowd points fingers, shouts, punishes, shuns, the real cause of suffering hides behind the curtain. Scapegoating works because it's simple. It turns complex problems into a face, a name, a threat you can see. It gives the public a sense of control, of action, of justice. But it's not justice, it's deflection. You'll find it in politics, when minorities are blamed for economic failure, in media, when one celebrity becomes the face of a broken culture, in institutions, when a single employee is fired to protect a corrupt hierarchy. It never solves the problem. It only silences the discomfort. And worst of all, it divides us. Because once a scapegoat is chosen, we're told we must choose sides. Are you with them or against us? But the real question is never asked, why are we being asked to blame anyone at all? So now, breathe. Look past the easy target, the loud headline, the convenient villain, and look deeper at the structure, the patterns, the silence at the top. Because when blame is thrown downward, you must always ask what's happening upward. Next, we'll look at how your mind is influenced, not through logic, but through what others do. This is social proof exploitation. Social proof exploitation, you see a crowd gathered, you hear applause, you see 5 stars, hundreds of reviews, millions of views, and without realizing it, you lean in, you follow. That's social proof. And in many ways, it's helpful. It tells us what's safe, what works, what's trusted. But when it's manipulated, it becomes a trap. This is social proof exploitation. Fake followers, fake reviews, bought applause, staged reactions to make you believe this must be right. Everyone else agrees. And once you believe that, you join in, not because of logic, but because of momentum. You become part of the proof. And this is how systems manufacture consent. They don't need you to believe first. They just need you to see others believing. So you mimic, you mirror, you go along, because to stand apart is uncomfortable. To question the crowd feels risky. But here's the truth. Crowds are often wrong. History is full of moments where the majority was misled. Wars were cheered, lies were voted into law, injustice was applauded. Because people thought, if everyone's clapping, maybe I should too. But you don't have to. You can pause. You can wait. You can ask, why does this need so much proof? Who benefits if I follow? Because real truth doesn't need to be shouted. It can stand alone. So now, lie back. You are not a number, not a trend, not a follower. You can see the crowd and still walk your own way. Next, we'll look at what happens when questioning stops and everyone thinks the same. This is groupthink induction. Groupthink induction. You're in a room, a decision is being made. Everyone nods. smiles, agrees, and something inside you whispers, this doesn't feel right, but you stay quiet. That's groupthink. And when it's intentional, it's groupthink induction, a psychological strategy used to maintain harmony. At the cost of truth, you're pressured to conform, not directly, but through tone, expectation, consensus. Everyone already agrees. Don't slow us down. Don't be negative. And so you suppress your doubt because rocking the boat feels dangerous. But in that silence, truth dies. Groupthink has caused disasters, failed missions, financial crashes, public tragedies, not because people were evil, but because no one felt safe to speak. And leaders, the ones who push unity over honesty, they know this. They foster groupthink to silence dissent, to create the illusion of unity, to avoid accountability. They surround themselves with yes men, ban uncomfortable voices, punish whistleblowers. And the public? They join in, out of fear, out of comfort. But comfort isn't always right. So what can you do? You can listen to the discomfort. You can be the quiet voice that says, I'm not sure, because that one voice can break the spell. Groupthink ends the moment someone thinks alone. Next, we'll explore how your very identity can be rewritten, carefully, quietly, until you don't remember who you were before. This is cultivating false identity. Cultivating false identity, who are you? Not your name, not your job, not your role. Who beneath all that? The truth is, you may not know anymore because identity can be shaped. This is cultivating false identity, a slow, subtle process, not done with force, but with repetition. From childhood, you're told who you are, what to believe, what to value, what to want. You're rewarded when you fit the mold. You're punished when you stray. You're a good student. You're a real man. You're a loyal citizen. You're not like them. And slowly, piece by piece, you build a self from expectations. But what if none of it was truly yours? What if your self was assembled from marketing, religion, politics, social media? What if your deepest opinions were planted? What if your personality was simply a reflection of what you were taught to admire? This isn't about guilt. It's about awareness. Because once you see the frame, you can step outside it. You can ask, do I actually believe this? Do I actually want this? Who would I be without these labels? That's where freedom begins. Not by choosing a new identity, but by unlearning the one given to you. So now, be still. Let the old labels fall away. They were just costumes. Scripts. You are allowed to be undefined, uncategorized, unfinished. In the next part, we'll explore the seeds planted next. Self-doubt. Because once you no longer know who you are, they can convince you of who you're not. The seeds of self-doubt, they don't have to control you completely. They just need you to hesitate, to look in the mirror and question what you see. This is how power thrives, by planting the seeds of self-doubt. It starts small. You're too emotional. You're not smart enough. You don't understand how things really work. You hear it from leaders, from systems, from strangers online, even from loved ones. And eventually, you start saying it to yourself. You second guess your voice, your instincts, your worth. You think, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm just not good at this. Maybe I shouldn't speak. That's the goal, not to defeat you, but to keep you quiet. Because people who doubt themselves rarely rebel, rarely ask questions, rarely act. They stay small, manageable, silent. And when entire populations feel small, power doesn't need chains. It only needs shame. So how do you break it? You notice the voice, not the loud voice outside, but the whisper within. And you ask, who taught me to doubt myself? Whose benefit does my silence serve? You weren't born unsure. You were made to feel that way. But you can return to your voice, to your knowing, to your full height. Self-trust is a rebellion. Confidence is clarity. And clarity cannot be controlled. Next, we'll explore how emotion itself, joy, fear, anger, isn't just contagious, it's used to move entire crowds. This is emotional contagion exploitation. Emotional contagion exploitation. You smile, others smile back. You yawn, a stranger yawns too. That's emotional contagion. The invisible thread between people. We catch feelings like fire catches dry grass, but in the wrong hands, that fire can burn a whole society. This is emotional contagion exploitation. Here's how it works. Power doesn't always control what you think. It controls what you feel. Because feelings spread fast, unfiltered, unquestioned. You see panic online, you feel panic. You see outrage, you join in. You see joy, shame, grief, and something inside you mirrors it. And if someone can trigger that emotion, they control the whole crowd. Politicians use this in speeches. One person claps, then 10, then thousands. Suddenly, you feel inspired, even if the words were empty. Media does it too. Emotional music, tearful interviews, laughter tracks, all guiding you to feel a certain way. And when enough people feel the same thing, it creates momentum, a tidal wave. And in that wave, you forget to stop, to question, to feel your own emotion. So what do? You pause. You ask, is this feeling mine or someone else's? That question is a shield, because emotion is beautiful, powerful, human. But when it's manipulated, it becomes a leash, and you were not born to be led. Next, we'll explore the illusion of options and how freedom becomes theater. This is the illusion of choice. The illusion of choice. You're standing in front of a shelf. There are 5 cereal boxes, 10 brands of water, 20 news channels. You feel free, empowered, because you have choice. But here's the question. Who chose what you get to choose from? This is the illusion of choice. Because real freedom isn't just about options, it's about creating options. And most of us don't. We're handed a menu, 2 candidates, 3 jobs, 4 schools, each one shaped, filtered, pre-approved, and we choose from that list, believing it's our decision. But it's not. It's containment disguised as freedom. You're told, you can protest, just not here. You can vote between these 2. You can speak if you use our platform. But the edges of your freedom have already been drawn. This tactic works because it feels empowering. And when people feel empowered, they don't look further. They don't ask, who made this list? What's missing? What am I not being allowed to imagine? That's the magic. It doesn't matter which box you pick. If the system owns the shelf, so what do? You step back, you look outside the menu, you ask, what would I choose if nothing was filtered for me? That's where real freedom lives. Not in picking between 2 sides, but in knowing you're allowed to build your own. Next, we'll explore how even your perception of value can be warped by a single number. This is the anchoring effect. Anchoring effect, you see a jacket for $1,000 is on sale for $499. You think that's a great deal. But is it, or were you anchored? This is the anchoring effect, a mental shortcut your brain uses to make sense of the world. The first number you see becomes the reference point. It doesn't matter if it's arbitrary. It sets the tone in negotiations, in pricing, in news, in policy. Want people to accept a harsh new law? Propose something worse first, then compromise. Want to sell a product? Show a more expensive one beside it. Want to influence public opinion? Flood them with extreme options. Then offer the one you actually wanted, and make it seem reasonable. Anchoring works because the brain loves shortcuts. It doesn't recalculate from scratch. It adjusts from the first number seen. So when systems control that first number, they shape how everything else is perceived, even when the truth is distorted, even when the deal is still a trap. So what do? You pause. You ask, what was I shown first? Who set the anchor? What would this look like without that comparison? Because when you remove the anchor, you regain perspective. Next, we'll explore how the same data can be used to tell 2 completely different stories, depending on how it's framed. This is framing effect manipulation. Framing effect manipulation, you hear this. The treatment has a 90% success rate. Sounds great. Now hear this. The treatment fails in 1 out of 10 cases. Suddenly, it feels risky, but it's the same fact. That's the framing effect, and it's everywhere. Because how you say something matters more than what you say. Governments use it, marketers use it, media uses it. They don't change the truth. They reshape how you receive it. Is unemployment improving at 7% or worsening from 6.5%? Is a war liberation or occupation? Is a protest freedom or chaos? It's the same reality wrapped in different words. And your brain, searching for clarity, clings to the frame because the frame offers emotion. It tells you how to feel, not just what to know. And when you feel, you stop questioning. So when power wants to guide you, it doesn't lie. It rephrases. And you agree to something you might have rejected if it had been presented differently. So what now? You pause, you look for the frame, and you ask, what's the opposite way to say this? What would this look like in different words? Because the truth is not in the phrase, it's in the pattern underneath it. Next, we'll explore how we unconsciously accept only what fits our current beliefs and how systems exploit that confirmation bias to keep us loyal. Confirmation bias reinforcement. You see a headline that supports what you already believe, and you click, you nod, you share it. But when you see something that challenges you, you scroll past, you laugh, you feel defensive. That's confirmation bias. The tendency to seek, believe, and remember information that agrees with what you already think. And while that's human, it's also dangerous. Because when powerful systems want to keep you loyal, they don't have to change your mind. They just have to feed it. They show you articles that confirm your views, comments that agree, ads that echo your opinions, and you feel validated, informed, confident. But slowly, you become trapped in a belief bubble. You stop hearing other voices. You stop seeing other options. You forget the world is bigger than your feed. This isn't just happening by accident. Algorithms are designed to reinforce bias. Because the more certain you feel, the more you engage, the more you click, the more predictable you become. And that predictability is profitable and powerful. It keeps you passive, tribal, sure of yourself, but blind to change. So what now? You ask, do I only believe this because it feels familiar? Have I ever seriously considered the opposite? It's not about agreeing, it's about being open. Because truth doesn't live in echo chambers. It lives in the uncomfortable spaces. Next, we'll explore how once you notice something, it starts appearing everywhere. That strange phenomenon isn't coincidence. It's the Barter-Meinhof effect. The Barter-Meinhof phenomenon, you hear a strange word once, then again, and suddenly it's everywhere. In headlines, in conversations, in the corner of your eye. You notice it on a billboard, on a stranger's shirt, in a podcast, on a product label you've walked past 100 times. You pause. Is this a sign? A coincidence? A message from the universe? Of number. It's not magic. It's called the Barter-Meinhof phenomenon, also known as frequency illusion. Once something enters your awareness, your mind, your vocabulary, your emotional field, your brain starts noticing it more. Not because it's suddenly new, but because you've become tuned in. Your brain is a spotlight. Think of your attention like a flashlight. Where you point it, the world lights up. Everything else fades into the background. You're not seeing more. You're just seeing differently. That's what this illusion is. Perception bias. A shift in your internal filters, and suddenly, the world seems full of patterns, full of signs, full of synchronicity. It feels magical, like the universe is trying to tell you something, like everything is connected, aligned, meant to be. But here's the truth. The world hasn't changed. You have. Your brain is simply prioritizing that thing, highlighting it, circling it in red ink. And once that happens, it becomes hard to ignore. How it's used against you? Here's where it gets tricky. Because this glitch in awareness is not just a fun brain fact, it's a tool. And like all tools, it can be used or abused. Marketers use it, campaign managers use it, social engineers use it. They don't have to change the world. They only need to change what you notice. They introduce a word, an idea, a fear. They say it once, then again, and suddenly you see it everywhere. You believe it's rising, growing, spreading, but it's not. You're just catching it more. You've been primed, and now your mind is scanning the horizon, looking for confirmation. Pattern hunting. That's how our minds work. We are wired for patterns. Because patterns help us survive. They help us predict danger, recognize opportunity. So we connect dots, even when those dots were placed there by someone else. And once a pattern starts forming, we believe it's real. Not just real, urgent, important. And we act, we click, we share, we panic, we vote, we buy. All because of something we think we discovered when it was quietly planted. Shiz the spiral. Here's where it becomes dangerous. Once you believe the pattern is real, you become part of it. You start repeating the term. You amplify it. You echo it back into the system, and others around you, they hear it now. They start noticing it too. And suddenly, a false pattern becomes a real phenomenon. Not because the world changed, but because the illusion became viral, and now the trap is complete. The illusion of urgency. This is how people are convinced the world is falling apart when statistics say otherwise. This is how fear spreads faster than truth. How a single news story feels like an epidemic. Because repetition is a mirror, and familiarity feels like truth. The more we see something, the more it feels important. Even if it's not, that's the illusion. That's the sleight of hand. So how do you protect yourself? You slow down. You don't trust frequency. You check facts before emotion. You ask, is this actually increasing, or am I just more aware of it now? Because noticing something more is not proof that it's growing, and just because it feels familiar doesn't mean it's true. Truth is not always loud. Sometimes it's silent, buried under noise, calms. Practice mental distance. If you hear a phrase over and over, pause. Ask, why now? Who benefits from me noticing this? What action am I being nudged toward? Then breathe. Frequency is not evidence. It's not urgency. It's just a blinking light on your mental dashboard. A sign that someone may have hit the snooze-proof button in your subconscious. You can choose to observe without immediately absorbing. Your mind, your map. This isn't about becoming paranoid. It's about becoming precise. Your brain is powerful, but it's also pliable. And once you realize how easily it's nudged, you stop being owned by what you see. Because what you see is not always what's there. And what feels true is not always real. A deeper glitch. Emotional anchoring. Sometimes what you notice is tied to what you feel. You feel stressed, so you notice threats. You feel lonely, so you notice rejections. You feel hopeful, so you notice possibility. Your emotion is the lens. And the Baader-Meinhof effect, it just keeps sharpening the focus. Until you start seeing life through only one filter, that's when bias becomes blindness. That's when perception becomes a trap. A real-world example. You hear the term cancel culture. It shows up in one post, then another, then a friend mentions it, then a headline, then a comedian makes a joke. Suddenly, you feel like the entire world is obsessed with it. You assume it's everywhere, taking over, out of control. But is it? Or did you just start seeing it once it was introduced to you? You didn't find the pattern found you, and now you're part of the loop. Perception isn't the map. This is the deeper truth. What you see is not the map of reality. It's the map of attention. And attention is always limited, always focused, always biased. Once something lights up, everything else dims. So to see clearly, you must zoom out. Look at data, look at history, look at context, ask better questions. Don't just look for what you've seen, look for what you haven't. Huge. Building a mental filter. You don't need to block everything. You need to filter wisely. Not every repetition is a trick, but every repetition is a cue to stop, reflect, ask what changed, the world or me. And when you learn to catch that shift, you take your power back. Because the difference between awareness and illusion is not what you see, it's what you believe about it. Final thought. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon is not evil. It's not dangerous on its own. It's a reminder. Your brain is working hard behind the scenes. Always updating your mental spotlight. Always learning, always prioritizing. That can be beautiful or blinding depending on who's holding the flashlight. Let that be you. In the next section, we look at something softer. A social tactic that doesn't feel like control, it feels like connection. It's called mirroring and matching, and it can make you feel seen or silently shaped. Mirror and matching you meet someone new. They smile like you, use similar words, match your posture, your energy, and suddenly you feel connected, understood, safe. That's mirroring and matching. It's a natural part of human bonding. It builds trust, rapport, belonging. But in manipulation, it becomes a strategy. Salespeople use it, politicians use it, influencers use it. They subtly mimic your behavior, they reflect your values, they adopt your tone, and you, without knowing, begin to trust them because we trust what feels familiar, what looks like us, sounds like us. It creates a sense of tribe, connection, even love, but it can be engineered to sell you something, to lead you somewhere, to win your loyalty. Even if the persona system doesn't share your values at all, that's the danger. Because once trust is built on reflection, it's not based on truth, it's based on illusion. So how do you protect yourself? You pause, you ask, do they truly understand me? Or are they just repeating me? Do they share my heart? Or are they wearing a mask? Because connection shouldn't be mimicked, it should be earned. In the next part, we'll explore a more advanced version of this, a technique used in persuasion, therapy, and yes, manipulation. This is pacing and leading. Pacing and leading, part 36, 500 words. First, they meet you where you are. They speak your language, match your rhythm, reflect your concerns. That's pacing. And once you feel understood, once they've built trust, they gently shift your direction. That's leading. Together, it's a powerful psychological technique. Pacing and leading is used in therapy to guide healing, is used in sales to guide decision making, and yes, is used in manipulation to guide belief. Here's how it works. Someone repeats truths you agree with. They validate your emotions. They echo your frustrations. You think, they get me. And because they've paced you, you're more likely to follow when they change the message. Maybe it starts with, you're tired of being lied to. You want your voice heard. You deserve better. You agree. Then it shifts, and that's why we need this law. That's why this group is to blame. That's why I'm the only one you can trust. And suddenly, you're being led, not forced, not convinced, led, because you were already moving. They just adjusted the path. This tactic is everywhere, in speeches, in interviews, in viral content, and it feels good. Because we love feeling seen, we love feeling guided. But guidance without honesty is control in disguise. So what can you do? You ask, do they keep validating me, or are they leading me somewhere I didn't intend to go? That question breaks the spell. You don't have to reject connection, you just have to notice its direction. In the next part, we'll go deeper to the language beneath the surface. This is neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Neuro-linguistic programming words are powerful, not just for meaning, but for motion. They can open doors in your mind or quietly close them. That's the basis of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, a communication method born in the 1970s, designed not just to talk to you, but to change you. Some use it for healing, to stop smoking, to find courage, to break old fears. Some use it for growth. Coaches, therapists, public speakers, to rewire patterns, to unlock confidence, to speak directly to the part of you that already knows what you need. But others use it for something else. Control, persuasion, manipulation. Because NLP doesn't just study words, it studies how your thoughts, feelings, and language patterns are connected. It finds your triggers, your values, your fears. Then it uses carefully chosen language to reframe your thinking, to bypass your logic, to anchor emotion in just the right place. You've heard the phrases before. People like you always make smart choices. You're already starting to feel more relaxed. You can imagine how good this is going to feel. These aren't just sentences. They're suggestions planted softly. While your conscious mind takes a step back, you don't even feel the shift happening. But it does, like a tide pulling you gently to shore. Because NLP doesn't argue with you. It doesn't shout. It guides. It guides the inner voice in your mind, the one that sounds like you, the one you trust. And so you follow it without even realizing where it came from. Used with care, it can be healing. But used with deception, it becomes invisible control. So what can you do? How do you protect yourself? You pay attention to language. You notice the framing. You watch how words feel, not just what they say. Because manipulation thrives where awareness is missing. And the next kind of influence, it's even harder to notice because it doesn't just whisper to you, it hides. Subliminal messaging. You don't see it, but it sees you. A flash of a word, a hidden shape in an ad, a symbol buried in a logo. This is subliminal messaging. Messages designed to slip beneath awareness, to bypass the gatekeeper of your mind and go straight to your unconscious. Your eyes blink, your ears relax, and the message passes through unchallenged. In the early days of film, advertisers would slip a single frame, drink Coke, buy popcorn, just for a fraction of a second. Too fast for your eyes to catch, but not for your brain. Some claimed it worked. Some called it a hoax. But the truth is, it doesn't take a single flash. It just takes the right mood, the right color, the right music, at just the right time. Red creates urgency. Blue builds trust. Green feels safe. A gentle piano builds nostalgia. A bass-heavy rhythm builds tension. Nothing is random. Even the smell in a store, fresh bread, cinnamon, coffee, is designed to make you stay longer, spend more. Feel something before you think anything. You're not choosing with logic. You're being primed with emotion. Because the most powerful messages aren't said out loud. They're suggested, they're felt, and they work best when you think you're making the choice. So how do you defend yourself? You slow down. You become aware of your state. When do you feel open? When do you feel rushed? What made you suddenly trust that voice or reach for that product? It's not always the content. It's the context. It's the setting. It's the mood they created before the message ever came. And when you catch it even once, you start to take your power back. But it goes deeper because sometimes the control isn't hidden around you. It's growing inside you. Priming, imagine you read the word yellow. Then someone asks you to name a fruit. Most people say banana. Why? Because your brain had already been primed. Priming is subtle, silent, unseen. One experience changes how you respond to the next without asking your permission, without making a sound. It doesn't feel like suggestion. It feels like your own idea. And that's the trick. Priming isn't about pushing. It's about tilting the floor beneath your feet. So when the moment comes to choose, you walk the direction someone else designed by yourself, smiling, and you'll swear it was your idea all along. Priming happens everywhere. In the background music at a store, in the scent pumped into the air, in the words your teacher chooses, in the posture of a stranger across the table, in the order things appear in a list, in the first thing someone compliments. A cheerful melody in an ad makes you trust the product. A slow, nostalgic piano piece makes you feel reflective. A fast beat with red visuals makes you click buy now. It's not just the message that matters. It's what came before it. What science shows a warm cup of tea in your hands? You're more likely to describe someone as warm-hearted. Sit in a clean, tidy room. You're more likely to judge someone's actions as morally wrong. Watch a scary video before a survey. You're more likely to support strict policies and harsh punishments. These aren't guesses. They're replicated findings. Your brain doesn't exist in a vacuum. It adapts to the environment around it instantly, unconsciously, and often inaccurately. What you just felt changes what you believe. You don't question it because it doesn't feel foreign. It feels familiar, internal, yours. That's why priming works so well, because the thought comes in your voice, and the idea feels organic, and the decision feels obvious, even though it was gently, quietly planted. Where you see it, politicians use it. They don't start with facts. They start with emotion, fear, hope, anger, pride. Once you're primed with emotion, then they present the policy, and now it makes sense. But it only makes sense because of how you were made to feel before you even heard it. Brands use it. Walk into a tech store, it's sleek, silver, white, quiet. That's not design. That's priming you to expect elegance, speed, simplicity, and to pay a little more without flinching. Restaurants do it. They dim the lights, slow the music, serve smaller portions on larger plates. Suddenly the food feels premium and your wallet opens just a little easier. Even doctors use it. A kind voice, soft lighting, a gentle explanation, and suddenly a difficult diagnosis feels easier to accept. It doesn't take much sometimes. The priming happens seconds before, and sometimes it happens years ago. A childhood compliment, "You're such a helper." That phrase becomes a lens. And now, every time someone needs help, you feel a pull, a duty. Even when it costs you, that's priming too. Long-term, emotional, deep, and it shapes your identity without you ever giving consent. Why it works on everyone? Because your brain is efficient. It takes shortcuts. It fills in blanks. It prefers fast feelings over slow logic. We are emotional, pattern-seeking, narrative-driven, and we rarely notice when the story isn't one we chose, but one we were fed. Even a single word, even a single look, can tip your response. That's how sensitive your subconscious is. It's not weak, it's not broken, it's just human. And it's always listening to what came before. So, how do you protect yourself? You won't stop priming from happening. It's part of being alive. But you can start to notice it. You can grow your awareness. Start by becoming curious. Ask yourself, why did I think that just now? What made that message feel so right? What emotion came before this decision? What was the tone of voice? What was the music playing? Was I feeling tired? Was I just complimented? Was I rushed? Was I flattered? Was I afraid? These are the hidden levers. They don't make you do something. They just make something feel easier to do. Spotting them gives you back the space to choose instead of react. When you spot the script, something happens when you become aware. You see the stage, you see the lights, you hear the music cue before the scene, and suddenly you're not just an actor anymore. You're the writer. You choose your own lines, and you begin to recognize when something isn't quite yours. Not your voice, not your need, not your fear. It was planted, shaped, echoed, and now that you've seen it, it loses its hold. The deeper work, once you start spotting the tricks, you can go deeper. Because the real transformation isn't just seeing what others do to you, it's understanding why it works on you. That's where the real power is. Ask, what stories shape me? What do I crave when I feel uncertain? Who made me believe I had to earn love by being useful? Why do I feel unsafe when I don't perform? These are your patterns, your internal priming. And if you don't know them, others will find them and use them. The more you know your own mind, your fears, your wounds, your longings, your blind spots, the less likely someone else is to guide them for their benefit. You can't erase your wiring, but you can learn the map. And with a map, you're no longer walking in the dark. This isn't about paranoia, it's about clarity. You can't turn off every influence, but you can learn to see them. And once you see them, you get to decide, is this really me? Is this my belief? Is this path mine or designed for me? And sometimes that's all it takes. A pause, a question, a breath to break the pattern, to write your own script, to choose with presence, not programming. So what is priming? Really? It's the whisper before the thought, the nudge before the step, the suggestion before the sentence. It is not evil. It is not good. It is a tool used by advertisers, by speakers, by friends, by parents, by leaders, by you. So the question is never, can I stop it? The question is, can I notice it and choose what happens next? That's how influence becomes awareness, and awareness becomes strength. In the next section, we explore how social conditioning from childhood to culture shapes the lens through which we see the world. Not just in the moment, but for a lifetime. But for now, take a breath. You're already seeing more than before. And that is the beginning of freedom. Language is a tool. It can heal or it can harm. It can guide or it can gaslight. It depends on who's holding it and why. The most dangerous influence isn't the one that shouts, it's the one that whispers in your own voice. So listen closely, not just to what's being said, but to what's being felt. Because awareness isn't just power, it's protection. In the next section, we'll explore how social conditioning can make you trust the wrong things and doubt your own instincts. But for now, take a breath. You've already started to see more clearly, and that is the beginning of freedom. Subliminal messaging. You hear a soft voice, it says, "You're beginning to feel relaxed." And suddenly, you do. Your shoulders soften, your breath deepens. The world seems to grow quieter, you feel safe, seen, like something inside you has been gently guided into calm. It doesn't feel like control, it feels like permission. But here's the truth. That sensation wasn't an accident, it wasn't magic, and it wasn't entirely your own. It was the result of something called suggestive language, the psychological foundation of hypnosis. Not the kind of hypnosis you see in a stage show with swinging watches and finger snaps. Not the caricatured version with people barking like dogs. No, this is something else, something subtler. This is everyday hypnosis, the kind that happens through rhythm, repetition, tone, and trust. This kind of language is used in therapy often to good effect. Hypnotherapy can help people quit smoking, reduce anxiety, process trauma, and rewire patterns of negative thought. In this context, suggestion is a tool of healing. It opens the mind to new possibilities. It softens rigid beliefs and invites healthier narratives. It offers space where change can occur. But when used manipulatively, suggestion becomes a quiet force of control. It doesn't demand obedience. It doesn't shout orders. It doesn't use fear. Instead, it guides, gently, almost invisibly, until you find yourself making decisions you think are your own, when really they were planted. Here's how it works. Suggestion plants a belief without directly stating it. The language used doesn't command you. It doesn't say, do this. It says, you might already be starting to feel like this is the right choice. It doesn't say, agree with me. It says, of course, you don't need to agree unless it begins to make sense for you. It doesn't say, trust me. It says, you may be starting to notice how this feels more comfortable now. These phrases embed a message. They create a mental environment where agreement feels safe, natural, familiar. And once the environment is there, the message slips in without resistance. It bypasses the front door of logic and walks straight into your subconscious. This is why suggestive language often feels like your own voice. It mirrors your inner thoughts. It speaks in your tone. So when the idea finally lands, it doesn't feel like something that was handed to you. It feels like something you realized. And when you're tired, emotionally raw, or in the presence of someone you trust, the effect is even stronger. Because in these moments, your mental defenses are lowered. Your critical filters go offline, and the soft voice slips through. That's why politicians use it. That's why salespeople use it. That's why media anchors use it. Not to argue, but to guide. They don't want to prove their point. They want you to feel like you've arrived at it yourself. And once that happens, once your brain thinks the thought was yours, it becomes incredibly difficult to question it. Let's take a closer look at some of these suggestive structures you're probably already noticing. You might be starting to realize you don't have to decide now, unless that feels natural. It's only fair to assume that. Most people begin to feel comfortable with this idea. These statements don't state facts. They plant feelings, they insert frames, they wrap suggestions in soft clothing so your brain doesn't recognize them as commands. And they are often paired with gentle tone, slowed pacing, and calming body language. These elements together make the message easier to absorb and harder to resist. When suggestion is used in therapy, it's usually consensual. The therapist and patient have an agreement. The goal is healing, growth, empowerment. But when the same techniques are used by those with hidden agendas, marketers, propagandists, abusers, they become coercive because the consent is no longer mutual. The influence is hidden, and the goal is control. Why is this so effective? Because suggestion operates under the radar. You don't notice it, you don't question it, and that's the point. It slides under your awareness like background music, shifting your mood without you realizing why. And if the speaker is someone you trust, someone who feels like an authority, someone who speaks slowly, softly, With warm eyes and confident posture, your brain lets them in. You don't even feel the moment your thoughts stop being yours. The brain is wired to seek ease. It wants patterns, predictability, and comfort. So when someone speaks in smooth, calming phrases, your brain opens the door, especially if you're in a heightened emotional state, especially if you're desperate for clarity, especially if you're exhausted. In these states, we crave relief, and the soft voice becomes the answer. It's also important to recognize how repetition enhances suggestion. When a phrase or idea is repeated over and over, whether in media, in advertising, or even in conversation, it begins to feel more true, more valid, more trustworthy. This is known as the illusory truth effect. You may not even agree with the message the first time you hear it, but by the 5th, 10th, or 50th time, it's been etched into your mental landscape. You feel familiarity, and your brain confuses that familiarity with truth. This is why slogans are repeated endlessly, why propaganda is drilled into citizens over and over, and why certain catchphrases stay with you long after you've left a room. The repetition isn't just noise, it's programming. Social reinforcement adds another layer. If multiple people repeat the same suggestive language, whether in a group setting, on social media, or in a meeting, your mind begins to assign the message social proof. If everyone else thinks this way, it must be right. This collective hypnosis makes resistance harder. You're not just hearing a message, you're being surrounded by it. And it becomes easier to surrender to it than to stand alone. So what can you do? How do you protect your mind from suggestions that aren't truly yours? First, listen for structure. Pay attention to how something is being said, not just what is being said. Are you being led gently? Is someone mirroring your feelings and then suggesting what comes next? Are they implying consent before you've given it? Second, ask yourself, is someone trying to plant a feeling? Do I feel unusually calm or convinced right now without understanding why? Did I come to this thought consciously, or was I guided into it? Have I heard this message before repeatedly? Is this belief mine, or did it come from outside voices I've absorbed over time? These questions interrupt the trance. They pull you back into awareness. And once you're aware, you can choose again, because clarity cannot be hypnotized. When you're thinking clearly, you are unprogrammable. Also, recognize your vulnerable states. When you're emotionally raw, sad, lonely, afraid, or physically tired, your critical thinking is weakened. That's when suggestion has the most power. In these moments, be extra cautious about who you're listening to, what content you're consuming, what voices you're letting into your mind. And remember, suggestion is not inherently bad. It's a tool. It can heal. It can inspire. It can help you shift when you're stuck. But it must be used with integrity, with honesty, with transparency. Manipulation is suggestion without permission. And when someone uses your openness against you, that's not persuasion, that's theft. The most powerful defense against this is slow thinking, reflection, repetition of your own values, trusting your gut and your mind, choosing discomfort over easy agreement when something doesn't sit right. Because the world is full of soft voices. Some mean well, some don't. And the difference between being guided and being controlled is whether you know it's happening. Coming up next, we explore another psychological trick, the priming effect. This is the priming effect. It happens when exposure to one stimulus influences your response to the next. And it's subtle, silent, everywhere. You're shown the word old, then asked to walk down a hallway. You walk more slowly. You're told the word aggressive, then shown a face. You see hostility, not because the word was obvious, but because it primed your brain, set the tone, opened a lens. Priming affects memory, emotion, perception, even moral judgment. It's used in advertising. Before you shop, you're shown words like luxury or essential. It's used in politics. Before a debate, headlines mention security or threat. It's used in education, in crime, in social engineering. Because the first thing you hear, even if it seems unrelated, frames the next thing you believe. And when you're unaware, you trust the emotion that follows, not realizing it was preloaded. This makes priming extremely effective and extremely invisible. So what can you do? You slow down your reaction. You ask, why did I respond that way? What came just before this? Was my emotional response mine, or was it handed to me? Because priming is not persuasion, it's programming. And when you see the script, you can stop it. There's a flash on the screen, you don't remember seeing it, but later you feel something. That's subliminal messaging. Messages placed below your conscious awareness, designed to influence thought or behavior without you ever noticing. It could be an image, a word, a phrase, a color, slipped into a movie frame, a logo, a song, an ad. It happens so fast, you don't register it. But your subconscious, it remembers. Studies have shown it can trigger emotion, shape preference, even influence buying decisions. And when systems media, corporations, governments use this tool, they can create associations between images and feelings that guide your choices. Imagine seeing a flag then, a smiling face, then a specific product. Your brain begins to link them without effort. You don't know why you trust it, you just do. That's the power of subliminal messaging. It doesn't argue, it suggests silently. And because there's no clear message, there's nothing to resist, no push to push back on. So how do you stay free? You become aware of the patterns, not the single image, but the repeated rhythm. You ask, why do I feel this way around this symbol? Was this emotion earned or inserted? Because awareness is the only light that reveals what's been hidden. Subliminal messaging doesn't stop at flashing images in a movie frame or slipping words into music tracks. It evolves. In the digital age, it's embedded in algorithmic behavior, autoplay sequences, and even ambient cues in shopping environments. For instance, certain stores play fast-paced music to make you move quickly and impulsively, while others use warm lighting and nostalgic scents to slow you down and encourage browsing. These are environmental suggestions, not directly visible or audible as single cues, but powerful in how they shape your mood and pace, and ultimately, your decisions. Social media platforms can do the same. You see a curated feed where specific themes or tones are repeated: joy, anger, fear, celebration. Not because that's the full spectrum of life, but because those emotions generate the most engagement. And without knowing it, you start to mirror them. You scroll through outrage and become irritated. You scroll through success stories and feel inadequate. The subliminal suggestion here isn't a word, it's the emotional state the platform encourages you to live in. Even colors play a role. Fast food brands often use reds and yellows because they increase appetite. Financial institutions tend to use blue, a color associated with trust and reliability. None of this is accidental. It's a silent design language. A form of priming, yes, but also a subtle way of steering behavior beneath the threshold of awareness. So how do you protect yourself from something you can't see? You slow down, you question your emotions, especially when they arrive suddenly or seem unearned. If you walk into a store and feel strangely compelled to buy, pause. Ask yourself, what am I responding to? Is it need or nudging? If you scroll through your feed and feel inferior or impulsive, step back. Ask, what am I being fed and who benefits from me feeling this way? You also give yourself space away from constant inputs. Walk without headphones. Read without multitasking. Let your brain recover its own voice, because silence isn't empty. It's where you hear your true thoughts. And the more familiar you are with them, the easier it is to recognize when something foreign tries to slip in. Subliminal influence is powerful because it doesn't knock, it slides under the door. But doors can be locked. Minds can be guarded. And once you become fluent in the language of influence, even the softest whisper becomes something you can hear and choose to ignore. In the next part, we'll go further still to explore how a single word before a question can change the answer entirely. This is the priming effect. Priming effect. You hear a word, then moments later you make a decision and you think it was yours. But what if that word changed everything? You hear a soft voice. It says, you're beginning to feel relaxed. And suddenly, you do. Your shoulders soften. Your breath deepens. The world seems to grow quieter. You feel safe, seen. Like something inside you has been gently guided into calm. It doesn't feel like control. It feels like permission. But here's the truth. That sensation wasn't an accident. It wasn't magic. And it wasn't entirely your own. It was the result of something called suggestive language, the psychological foundation of hypnosis. Not the kind of hypnosis you see in a stage show with swinging watches and finger snaps. Not the caricatured version with people barking like dogs. No, this is something else. something subtler. This is everyday hypnosis, the kind that happens through rhythm, repetition, tone, and trust. This kind of language is used in therapy often to good effect. Hypnotherapy can help people quit smoking, reduce anxiety, process trauma, and rewire patterns of negative thought. In this context, suggestion is a tool of healing. It opens the mind to new possibilities. It softens rigid beliefs and invites healthier narratives. It offers space where change can occur. But when used manipulatively, suggestion becomes a quiet force of control. It doesn't demand obedience. It doesn't shout orders. It doesn't use fear. Instead, it guides, gently, almost invisibly, until you find yourself making decisions you think are your own, when really, they were planted. Here's how it works. Suggestion plants a belief without directly stating it. The language used doesn't command you. It doesn't say, do this. It says, you might already be starting to feel like this is the right choice. It doesn't say, agree with me. It says, of course, you don't need to agree unless it begins to make sense for you. It doesn't say, trust me. It says, you may be starting to notice how this feels more comfortable now. These phrases embed a message. They create a mental environment where agreement feels safe, natural, familiar. And once the environment is there, the message slips in without resistance. It bypasses the front door of logic and walks straight into your subconscious. This is why suggestive language often feels like your own voice. It mirrors your inner thoughts. It speaks in your tone, so when the idea finally lands, it doesn't feel like something that was handed to you. It feels like something you realize. And when you're tired, emotionally raw, or in the presence of someone you trust, the effect is even stronger. Because in these moments, your mental defenses are lowered, your critical filters go offline, and the soft voice slips through. That's why politicians use it. That's why salespeople use it. That's why media anchors use it. Not to argue, but to guide. They don't want to prove their point. They want you to feel like you've arrived at it yourself. And once that happens, once your brain thinks the thought was yours, it becomes incredibly difficult to question it. Let's take a closer look at some of these suggestive structures. You're probably already noticing. You might be starting to realize. You don't have to decide now, unless that feels natural. It's only fair to assume that. Most people begin to feel comfortable with this idea. These statements don't state facts. They plant feelings, they insert frames, they wrap suggestions in soft clothing so your brain doesn't recognize them as commands. And they are often paired with gentle tone, slowed pacing, and calming body language. These elements together make the message easier to absorb and harder to resist. When suggestion is used in therapy, it's usually consensual. The therapist and patient have an agreement. The goal is healing, growth, empowerment. But when the same techniques are used by those with hidden agendas, marketers, propagandists, abusers, they become coercive because the consent is no longer mutual. The influence is hidden, and the goal is control. Why is this so effective? Because suggestion operates under the radar. You don't notice it, you don't question it, and that's the point. It slides under your awareness like background music, shifting your mood without you realizing why. And if the speaker is someone you trust, someone who feels like an authority, someone who speaks slowly, softly, with warm eyes and confident posture, your brain lets them in. You don't even feel the moment your thoughts stop being yours. The brain is wired to seek ease. It wants patterns, predictability, and comfort. So when someone speaks in smooth, calming phrases, your brain opens the door, especially if you're in a heightened emotional state, especially if you're desperate for clarity, especially if you're exhausted. In these states, we crave relief, and the soft voice becomes the answer. It's also important to recognize how repetition enhances suggestion. When a phrase or idea is repeated over and over, whether in media, in advertising, or even in conversation, it begins to feel more true, more valid, more trustworthy. This is known as the illusory truth effect. You may not even agree with the message the first time you hear it, but by the 5th, 10th, or 50th time, it's been etched into your mental landscape. You feel familiarity, and your brain confuses that familiarity with truth. This is why slogans are repeated endlessly, why propaganda is drilled into citizens over and over, and why certain catchphrases stay with you long after you've left a room. The repetition isn't just noise, it's programming. Social reinforcement adds another layer. If multiple people repeat the same suggestive language, whether in a group setting, on social media, or in a meeting, your mind begins to assign the message social proof. If everyone else thinks this way, it must be right. This collective hypnosis makes resistance harder. You're not just hearing a message, you're being surrounded by it. And it becomes easier to surrender to it than to stand alone. So what can you do? How do you protect your mind from suggestions that aren't truly yours? First, listen for structure. Pay attention to how something is being said, not just what is being said. Are you being led gently? Is someone mirroring your feelings and then suggesting what comes next? Are they implying consent before you've given it? Second, ask yourself, is someone trying to plant a feeling? Do I feel unusually calm or convinced right now without understanding why? Did I come to this thought consciously, or was I guided into it? Have I heard this message before repeatedly? Is this belief mine, or did it come from outside voices I've absorbed over time? These questions interrupt the trance. They pull you back into awareness. And once you're aware, you can choose again. Because clarity cannot be hypnotized. When you're thinking clearly, you are unprogrammable. Also, recognize your vulnerable states. When you're emotionally raw, sad, lonely, afraid, or physically tired, your critical thinking is weakened. That's when suggestion has the most power. In these moments, be extra cautious about who you're listening to, what content you're consuming, what voices you're letting into your mind. And remember, suggestion is not inherently bad. It's a tool. It can heal, it can inspire, it can help you shift when you're stuck, but it must be used with integrity, with honesty, with transparency. Manipulation is suggestion without permission. And when someone uses your openness against you, that's not persuasion. That's theft. The most powerful defense against this is slow thinking, reflection, repetition of your own values, trusting your gut and your mind, choosing discomfort over easy agreement when something doesn't sit right. Because the world is full of soft voices. Some mean well, some don't. And the difference between being guided and being controlled is whether you know it's happening. Coming up next, we explore another psychological trick, the priming effect. This is the priming effect. It happens when exposure to one stimulus influences your response to the next. And it's subtle, silent, everywhere. You're shown the word old, then asked to walk down a hallway. You walk, more slowly. You're told the word aggressive, then shown a face. You see hostility, not because the word was obvious, but because it primed your brain, set the tone, opened a lens. Priming affects memory, emotion, perception, even moral judgment. It's used in advertising. Before you shop, you're shown words like luxury or essential. It's used in politics. Before debate, headlines mention security or threat. It's used in education, in crime, in social engineering. Because the first thing you hear, even if it seems unrelated, frames the next thing you believe. And when you're unaware, you trust the emotion that follows, not realizing it was preloaded. This makes priming extremely effective and extremely invisible. So what can you do? You slow down your reaction. You ask, why did I respond that way? What came just before this? Was my emotional response mine, or was it handed to me? Because priming is not persuasion, it's programming. And when you see the script, you can stop it. Next, we'll explore how urgency is created not by real danger, but by artificial pressure. This is creating a sense of urgency. Suggestive language and hypnosis. You hear a soft voice. It says, you're beginning to feel relaxed, and suddenly you do. Your shoulders soften, your breath deepens. The world seems to grow quieter. You feel safe, seen, like something inside you has been gently guided into calm. It doesn't feel like control. It feels like permission. But here's the truth. That sensation wasn't an accident. It wasn't magic. And it wasn't entirely your own. It was the result of something called suggestive language, the psychological foundation of hypnosis. Not the kind of hypnosis you see in a stage show with swinging watches and finger snaps. Not the caricatured version with people barking like dogs. No, this is something else. Something subtler. This is everyday hypnosis, the kind that happens through rhythm, repetition, tone, and trust. This kind of language is used in therapy often to good effect. Hypnotherapy can help people quit smoking, reduce anxiety, process trauma, and rewire patterns of negative thought. In this context, suggestion is a tool of healing. It opens the mind to new possibilities. It softens rigid beliefs and invites healthier narratives. It offers space where change can occur. But when used manipulatively, suggestion becomes a quiet force of control. It doesn't demand obedience. It doesn't shout orders. It doesn't use fear. Instead, it guides, gently, almost invisibly, until you find yourself making decisions you think are your own, when really, they were planted. Here's how it works. Suggestion plants a belief without directly stating it. The language used doesn't command you. It doesn't say, do this. It says, you might already be starting to feel like this is the right choice. It doesn't say, agree with me. It says, of course, you don't need to agree unless it begins to make sense for you. It doesn't say, trust me. It says, you may be starting to notice how this feels more comfortable now. These phrases embed a message. They create a mental environment where agreement feels safe, natural, familiar, and once the environment is there, the message slips in without resistance. It bypasses the front door of logic and walks straight into your subconscious. This is why suggestive language often feels like your own voice. It mirrors your inner thoughts. It speaks in your tone, so when the idea finally lands, it doesn't feel like something that was handed to you, it feels like something you realized. And when you're tired, emotionally raw, or in the presence of someone you trust, the effect is even stronger. Because in these moments, your mental defenses are lowered, your critical filters go offline, and the soft voice slips through. That's why politicians use it. That's why salespeople use it. That's why media anchors use it. Not to argue, but to guide. They don't want to prove their point. They want you to feel like you've arrived at it yourself. And once that happens, once your brain thinks the thought was yours, it becomes incredibly difficult to question it. Let's take a closer look at some of these suggestive structures. You're probably already noticing. You might be starting to realize. You don't have to decide now, unless that feels natural. It's only fair to assume that. Most people begin to feel comfortable with this idea. These statements don't state facts. They plant feelings, they insert frames, they wrap suggestions in soft clothing so your brain doesn't recognize them as commands. And they are often paired with gentle tone, slowed pacing, and calming body language. These elements together make the message easier to absorb and harder to resist. When suggestion is used in therapy, it's usually consensual. The therapist and patient have an agreement. The goal is healing, growth, empowerment. But when the same techniques are used by those with hidden agendas, marketers, propagandists, abusers, they become coercive because the consent is no longer mutual. The influence is hidden, and the goal is control. Why is this so effective? Because suggestion operates under the radar. You don't notice it, you don't question it, and that's the point. It slides under your awareness like background music, shifting your mood without you realizing why. And if the speaker is someone you trust, someone who feels like an authority, someone who speaks slowly, softly, with warm eyes and confident posture, your brain lets them in. You don't even feel the moment your thoughts stop being yours. The brain is wired to seek ease. It wants patterns, predictability, and comfort. So when someone speaks in smooth, calming phrases, your brain opens the door, especially if you're in a heightened emotional state, especially if you're desperate for clarity, especially if you're exhausted. In these states, we crave relief, and the soft voice becomes the answer. So what can you do? How do you protect your mind from suggestions that aren't truly yours? First, listen for structure. Pay attention to how something is being said, not just what is being said. Are you being led gently? Is someone mirroring your feelings and then suggesting what comes next? Are they implying consent before you've given it? Second, ask yourself, is someone trying to plant a feeling? Do I feel unusually calm or convinced right now without understanding why? Did I come to this thought consciously, or was I guided into it? These questions interrupt the trance. They pull you back into awareness. And once you're aware, you can choose again. Because clarity cannot be hypnotized. When you're thinking clearly, you are unprogrammable. Also, recognize your vulnerable states. When you're emotionally raw, sad, lonely, afraid, or physically tired, Your critical thinking is weakened. That's when suggestion has the most power. In these moments, be extra cautious about who you're listening to, what content you're consuming, what voices you're letting into your mind. And remember, suggestion is not inherently bad. It's a tool. It can heal, it can inspire, it can help you shift when you're stuck. But it must be used with integrity, with honesty, with transparency. Manipulation is suggestion without permission. And when someone uses your openness against you, that's not persuasion, that's theft. The most powerful defense against this is slow thinking, reflection, repetition of your own values, trusting your gut and your mind, choosing discomfort over easy agreement when something doesn't sit right. Because the world is full of soft voices. Some mean well, some don't. And the difference between being guided and being controlled is whether you know it's happening. Coming up next, we explore another psychological trick, the power of urgency. Not real danger, not immediate threat, but artificial pressure. The kind that rushes you, panics you, makes you move before you're ready. This is creating a sense of urgency, and it works not by convincing you, but by making sure you never have time to question it. Creating a sense of urgency. Time is running out. Limited offer. Last chance. Act now. These phrases appear everywhere in your inbox, on your screen, in store windows, shouted from stages and whispered in headlines. They're short, punchy, and carefully designed to provoke a single response, immediate action. And they work. Why? Because when we hear them, something ancient stirs inside us. A pulse quickens. A flicker of fear rises. It's not just marketing, it's biology. This is the creation of urgency, a psychological strategy used to bypass your rational thinking and push you into making fast decisions. It's not about helping you choose what's best. It's about making sure you don't pause long enough to figure out what that even is. When urgency is manufactured, when it's false, artificial, or exaggerated, it becomes a form of manipulation. A subtle form of control that looks like excitement but functions like pressure. You're not making decisions anymore. You're reacting to them. Urgency works by tapping into your survival instinct. Our brains are wired to respond to threats. When we sense danger or even just the possibility of loss, our fight or flight system kicks in. Our attention narrows. Our logical reasoning slows. The emotional brain takes over, and it prioritizes speed over depth, reaction over reflection, movement over meaning. That's how you end up buying something you didn't need, voting for something you didn't understand, signing something you didn't read. Because when the message is act now or miss out forever, your brain doesn't stop to ask, should I? It just says, go. This tactic shows up everywhere. In sales, it looks like only 2 seats left. Sale ends at midnight. Offer expires in 30 minutes. You see a countdown timer. You feel the clock ticking. Maybe you weren't even planning to buy anything, but suddenly it feels like a mistake to wait. Not because the item got better, but because the window feels like it's closing. And you've been trained by countless urgent messages to believe that waiting equals missing out. But here's the truth. Most of these timers are fake. The sale restarts tomorrow. The seats weren't actually limited. The product isn't going away. But the feeling of urgency, that's real. And it's enough to push you into buying now. In politics, urgency becomes even more dangerous. We must act before it's too late. There's no time to wait. If we don't pass this law today, disaster is coming tomorrow. Urgency here is used not to sell a product, but to sell a decision, a policy, a war, a restriction, a candidate. And in the fog of panic, people don't ask questions. They don't demand evidence. They just fall in line. Fear makes obedience feel like logic. Action feels like safety. And leaders who know this tactic well can pass sweeping changes while the public is distracted by the clock. This is especially true during crises. In moments of uncertainty, natural disasters, economic crashes, terrorist attacks, pandemics, people crave certainty. Leaders step in and say, we need emergency powers. And the people say yes, not because they've thought it through, but because the world feels dangerous and unstable. But here's the pattern you'll see again and again. Emergency powers don't go away. Rush laws don't get rolled back. Surveillance measures, wartime powers, executive orders, they linger long after the crisis fades, and no one can quite remember who agreed to them. but they're still there, still shaping lives. In fear campaigns, urgency is sharpened into weaponized anxiety. This threat is coming now. We must act before it's too late. This law is our only hope. Whether it's the threat of violence, economic collapse, or social chaos, these messages work because they create the illusion of now or never. They make it feel like inaction equals destruction. And once again, people comply not because they were convinced, but because they were cornered. But here's the thing. The most effective urgency is the kind you don't even notice. It's in the design of websites, the layout of buttons, the size of fonts. It's the red banner flashing at the top of your screen, the push notification that says ending soon, the reminder that others are looking at this too. It's frictionless, invisible, normalized, and that's what makes it so powerful. So what can you do to defend yourself against manufactured urgency? First, and most importantly, pause. Even when everything is telling you not to, especially when it's telling you not to, pause long enough to ask, is this urgency real or created? What would I do if I had all the time in the world to think about this? Is someone benefiting from me rushing right now? When you pause, you interrupt the reaction loop. You give your logical brain time to wake up. You reclaim the part of yourself that evaluates instead of obeys. Second, recognize the patterns. If you've seen a countdown timer, before know that it's likely fake. If a political figure is insisting something must be done, immediately ask why. If a company is saying this is your last chance, ask what happens if you wait a day. Often the answer is nothing changes. The urgency was never real. It was designed to bypass your mind and access your instincts. Third, build a habit of resistance. The more often you slow down in urgent situations, the stronger your ability becomes. It's a muscle. And every time you wait, reflect, question, you strengthen it. You prove to yourself that you are not controlled by fear, that you don't need to move fast to make good decisions. That deliberate is stronger than desperate, because urgency is a fog. And in fog, people don't look for direction, they look for noise, for signals, for whatever is loudest. And often, the loudest voice is the one guiding you away from truth. But when you become still in that fog, when you resist the rush, you become the one who sees clearly. You become immune to panic. This is especially important in democratic systems, where rush decisions can't easily be reversed. When a government passes laws under the banner of urgency, those laws become scaffolding. They support the system going forward. They shape what's possible next. And even when the reason for their passage disappears, the structure remains. And with it, your freedom narrows. Bit by bit, the world will always try to speed you up. Companies, governments, media, influencers. They want you to move fast because fast movement benefits them. But you don't owe your urgency to anyone. You owe yourself clarity. And clarity takes time. So the next time you hear, act now, ask why now. Ask, who wants me to rush and why? And if the answer isn't grounded in truth, logic, or evidence, then don't. Because the freedom to wait is a form of power. And in a world addicted to speed, the ability to pause is revolutionary. Coming up next, we'll explore how this urgency is only the beginning of manipulation. Sometimes, the tactic doesn't start with pressure, it starts with something small, something harmless, something easy to agree to. And before you know it, you're walking a path you never intended to take. That's the next technique, the foot in the door method, where each tiny yes leads to a larger one until you forget how to say no. Priming effect. You hear a word, it's simple, almost throwaway. A single moment in the stream of conversation or a headline flashing across a screen. You don't think much of it, maybe you don't consciously register it at all. And yet minutes later you make a decision, form a judgment, react emotionally. And you believe, with absolute confidence, that the thought was your own, that you came to that conclusion freely. But what if that one word, the one you barely noticed, had already set the stage? What if it quietly shaped your behavior, your memory, your choices? This is the priming effect. And it's one of the most powerful, invisible influences acting on your mind. Priming is a psychological phenomenon where exposure to one stimulus influences your response to a later one. It works subtly, beneath the surface of your awareness. Your brain makes associations constantly so quickly and automatically that you rarely stop to question them. If you read the word old, for example, and are then asked to walk down a hallway, research shows you may walk more slowly, not because you consciously feel older, but because the concept of oldness was primed in your subconscious. The associations triggered by that word ripple out and shape your actions. Likewise, if you're shown the word aggressive and then asked to interpret an ambiguous facial expression, you're more likely to see hostility even if it isn't there. Not because the face changed, but because you did. This is the essence of priming. It frames your next experience before it happens. It doesn't shout, it doesn't instruct, it nudges. It opens a lens through which you see the world. And once that lens is in place, everything you look at is slightly altered. And here's what makes priming so deceptive: it feels natural. You don't feel like you've been manipulated, you don't feel pushed. The resulting thought or emotion feels like it came from you, and that's what makes it so effective. Priming affects not only perception and behavior, but also memory, moral judgment, decision-making, and emotional reaction. It works through a process called semantic activation, where your brain lights up related pathways when a concept is introduced. So if someone primes the idea of safety, your brain becomes more attuned to threats. If someone primes the idea of scarcity, you may be more likely to buy something or hoard resources. These effects are measurable and they happen without your consent. You'll find priming everywhere. In advertising, before you even see a product, you're exposed to priming words like luxury, pure, essential, or exclusive. These words trigger specific emotional frameworks. If you've just been primed with the word premium and then shown a new phone model, your brain is more likely to assign value to it. Not because of the specs, but because your interpretive lens was altered. You're not evaluating the phone objectively, you're seeing it through a primed emotional filter. It's used in politics constantly. Before a major debate or election, headlines will reference terms like security, crisis, integrity, or scandal. These words activate certain fears, associations, and ideological pathways. A political candidate doesn't need to tell you directly what to believe. They just need to set the context. Once primed, you'll do the rest. You'll interpret their actions through the lens they've quietly planted. You'll feel more anxious, more trusting, more outraged, more loyal, depending on the script. In education, priming can affect how students perform on exams. When students are reminded of stereotype essay, girls being bad at math, or a certain race being less academic, those primed thoughts can sabotage performance, even if the students don't consciously believe the stereotype. That's called stereotype threat, and it's a specific kind of priming that influences outcomes based on deeply ingrained social cues. In law enforcement and media coverage, priming plays a role in how crimes are reported and interpreted. When headlines include words like gang-related, radicalized, or terrorism, they frame how we interpret the individuals involved even before any facts are presented. Priming can make one person seem like a victim and another a threat, based solely on the words used to describe the situation. And perhaps most concerning of all, priming is a foundational tool in social engineering and propaganda. When someone wants to manipulate public opinion, they don't have to lie outright. They just have to carefully select which words come first. If you lead with threat, danger, or decline, your audience is primed for fear. If you lead with progress, unity, or victory, you prime hope and optimism. The information that follows doesn't have to change it. The context that shapes how it's received. So if priming is so subtle and so invisible, how can you fight it? The first step is awareness. You start noticing not just what you're thinking, but why you're thinking it. When a strong emotion or reaction hits you, especially if it feels sudden or disproportionate, pause and ask, what just came before this? What words, images, or associations might have primed me? Would I feel the same way if that first impression hadn't been there? This process of mental tracing can reveal patterns you didn't know were there. It gives you the chance to reclaim the memento, choose consciously, rather than reacting automatically. Because priming isn't the problem. Unseen priming is, once you recognize the lens, you can decide whether to look through it or take it off. Another powerful defense is deliberate deconstruction. When you see an ad, a speech, a headline, take a moment to strip away the priming cues. Ask yourself, what's the core message here without the framing? For example, if an ad says, this essential skincare product is trusted by millions, Remove the primed language and see what's left. A skincare product with no actual evidence of quality presented. The words essential and trusted are suggestive cues, not facts. You can also practice reverse priming, where you intentionally expose yourself to a broader or opposing set of ideas before making a decision. If you've been primed to fear something, read a perspective that frames it differently. If you've been primed for scarcity, remind yourself of abundance. This helps balance the emotional weight of the original prime. Ultimately, the most powerful tool against priming is slowness. Priming relies on your automatic brain. The faster you respond, the more likely you're being influenced. When you slow down, breathe, and reflect, you give your critical mind time to take the wheel. You switch from automatic to intentional, from reactive to reflective. And here's the deeper truth. Priming isn't always malicious. It can be helpful. It can inspire. It can motivate you to act when you're stuck. Therapists use positive priming to shift mental patterns. Educators use it to focus attention. Even your own self-talk can serve as a form of healthy priming. The key difference is consent. Are you choosing the framer, or is it being chosen for you? Because when you don't see the prime, you trust the reaction. You believe your anger is pure. Your fear is justified. Your decision is entirely your own. But what if it's not? What if it was loaded into you moments before you had the thought? That's what makes priming both beautiful and dangerous. It's not just a trick, it's a mechanism built into how the brain works. And those who understand it can program you in plain sight. So the next time you hear a word, see a phrase, feel an emotion rising, quickly stop. Trace the line backward. What just entered your mind? Was it planted or was it real? Because priming is not persuasion, it's programming. And once you see the script, you don't have to follow it. Coming up next, we explore another way your thinking is guided, not through framing or exposure, but through language designed to feel like your own inner voice. When suggestion replaces logic, and your choices feel natural even when they're not, this is the world of hypnosis and everyday suggestive language, and it's quieter, smoother, and far more dangerous than you think. Suggestive language in hypnosis. You hear a soft voice. It says, "You're beginning to feel relaxed." And somehow, without even realizing why you do, your shoulders drop slightly. Your breath slows. A part of you starts to feel like you're in good hands, safe, calm, open. And while that may seem like a simple coincidence, just a natural moment of calm, what's actually happening is something much more precise. It's not magic, it's suggestive language. A technique rooted in psychology and communication that taps into the very structure of how the human mind processes reality. This is the quiet, powerful foundation of everyday hypnosis. Now, when people hear the word hypnosis, they often picture a dramatic stage act. A man in a tuxedo swings a watch in front of your eyes. He snaps his fingers and suddenly you're clucking like a chicken. But that's not what we're talking about. That's performance. That's showmanship. Real hypnosis is the kind that affects your thoughts, emotions, and decisions is subtler, slower, hidden inside ordinary language. And it happens far more often than you think. This form of suggestion isn't theatricalis therapeutic. It's been used in clinical hypnosis to help people break habits, heal trauma, reduce anxiety, and reconnect with buried parts of themselves. In the right context, it's a beautiful tool. Suggestion works because the human mind is highly responsive to language, especially when the language feels personal, calm, and safe. But the same tools that help us heal can also be turned into weapons of influence. When suggestion is used manipulatively, it stops being guidance and becomes control, not through commands, but through soft invitations. Not by telling you what to think, but by making you think it was your idea all along. Here's how it works. Suggestive language embeds ideas indirectly. It uses rhythm, structure, and emotionally disarming tones to sneak beliefs into your subconscious. Consider these phrases. You're probably already realizing how simple this is. You might start to feel like this option is best for you. Of course, you don't need to decide right now unless it feels natural to. What's powerful about these sentences is that they don't tell you what to think outright. They don't make a hard sell. Instead, they offer the illusion of choice, the illusion of autonomy. But embedded inside them are subtle cues, nudges toward agreement. You're being told what to think, but in a way that feels like a suggestion, not an order. It's not just the words that matter, it's the structure. These phrases are often delivered in a calm, slow, rhythmic tone. That tone matters because when speech is slow and repetitive, it begins to lull the brain into a relaxed, open state where critical thinking is reduced and suggestibility is increased. That's why people become more vulnerable to influence when they're tired, emotionally drained, lonely, or stressed. Their defenses are down. Their minds are looking for relief, for clarity, for a voice that feels certain. And the suggestive speaker becomes that voice. This is why trust plays such a huge role. When someone feels trustworthy, we unconsciously lower our guard. We assume they have our best interests at heart. And that trust becomes the gateway through which suggestions flow. We're not just listening, we're absorbing. This happens in therapy sessions. Yes, but also in advertisements, news broadcasts, campaign speeches, sales calls, and even intimate relationships. Suggestion is everywhere. It's in the way influencers speak on social media. It's in how motivational speakers structure their mantras. It's in how a politician delivers a promise, not as a fact, but as a softly planted idea. You already know I'm the one who can fix this. The goal isn't to argue, it's not to prove. It's to guide your feelings and let your feelings carry the decision. Because when you feel relaxed, safe, and slightly emotionally open, your mind stops asking questions and the suggestion sinks in. You may even think, I decided this on my own. But that's the genius of it. The best manipulation never feels like manipulation. It feels like clarity, and the effects compound. The more suggestive phrases you hear, the more primed you become. One idea leads to another. If someone says, you're already starting to see the benefits of this, your mind starts scanning for those benefits. Not because you found them, but because you were told you would. That's called priming gand. It's the backbone of how suggestion builds belief. It's easy to dismiss this as only working on the gullible, but that's not true. Suggestive language works on everyone: intellectuals, skeptics, professionals, even those trained to detect manipulation, because it doesn't confront your intelligence. It bypasses it. It doesn't ask you to agree, it subtly assumes that you already do. And the mind, craving consistency, often just goes along. This becomes especially dangerous when suggestion is combined with other manipulative tactics like urgency, scarcity, or social proof. For example, you're probably already realizing this offer won't last. It's only natural to feel like now's the time to act. Others are already seeing results. You might start noticing that too. These sentences don't say anything definitively, but they guide you. They lead you to a conclusion you never stopped to question, because it didn't feel like someone telling you. It felt like someone understanding you. So what can you do in the face of this kind of influence? First, listen for the structure of speech. Pay attention to how things are said, not just what is said. Do you notice phrases that assume your agreement, that describe your feelings before you've had them, that gently imply an outcome before you've thought about it? These are red flags. Second, ask yourself, is someone trying to plant a feeling inside me? Do I feel unusually convinced right now without knowing why? Am I being told how I feel instead of asked? These questions interrupt the trance. They bring you back to awareness, and awareness is the antidote to suggestion. Another thing you can do is recognize your state. Are you tired, distracted, lonely, emotionally raw? These are the moments you're most susceptible. And that's not weakness, it's biology. But if you can name your state, you can defend your mind. You can recognize that clarity doesn't live in softness alone. It lives in deliberate thought, in reflection, in choice. And finally, remember, real persuasion doesn't hide. It makes its case openly. It gives you time, space, and freedom. It doesn't whisper in your ear pretending to be your own voice. When someone truly respects your mind, they invite you to think. When they don't, they suggest. Everyday hypnosis is real. It's not theatrical, it's not obvious, and that's exactly why it works. You walk into it, you smile through it, and you carry its ideas with you without realizing where they came from. But you can reclaim that space. You can listen differently. You can feel the pull and choose not to follow it. Because clarity doesn't come from being guided into agreement. It comes from being given the dignity to decide. And now that we've peeled back the layers of suggestion, how language becomes belief, how rhythm becomes compliance, we return to another powerful force, not the slow whisper of guidance, but the sharp, loud urgency of now. Let's look next at how the pressure to act fast is created not by real danger, but by artificial deadlines, countdowns, and crises. This is creating a sense of urgency, and its goal is not to inform you, but to make sure you don't think. Creating a sense of urgency. Time is running out. Limited offer. Last chance. Act now. You've seen these phrases 1,000 times. On billboards, in emails, in commercials, popping up on your phone screen when you're barely awake. They sound urgent, they sound important, and most of all, they sound final. And something happens to you when you hear them. A flicker in your chest, a slight increase in your heartbeat, a low-level panic that whispers, if I don't move now, I'll lose something. It's not a loud fear, but a fast one. That sudden pressure, that urgency, makes you feel like you need to decide immediately, like hesitation equals loss. This isn't by accident. It's a psychological strategy known as urgency manipulation, and it works very well. Why? Because it speaks directly to the part of your brain that evolved to keep you alive. That ancient part of your mind, the one that once helped you avoid predators and make split-second decisions to survive, can't tell the difference between an approaching tiger and a flashing offer ends in 3 minutes. Countdown timer. It sees urgency, hears the alarm bells, and says, forget reflection, just act. That instinct served us in the wild, but in the modern world, it's often used against us. Urgency short-circuits critical thinking. It overrides analysis. It silences your inner voice that might otherwise say, wait, is this even a good idea? When urgency is manufactured, it becomes a tool of control, not because it informs you, but because it rushes you. It pushes you into reaction, not decision. And that's the whole goal. If you had time to reflect, you might walk away, but urgency makes you feel like you don't have time. That's how it traps you. This manipulation appears everywhere. In sales and marketing, you'll hear things like, only 2 seats left. Sale ends at midnight. This deal won't be here tomorrow. You're shown countdowns, timers, low stock warnings, scarcity and speed woven together. But often these alerts are fake. The timers reset, the products are still there next week. The sold out soon warning was just a script. It doesn't matter if it's real, it only matters if you believe it. Because once the pressure hits, your rational mind becomes quiet and the credit card comes out. In politics, the stakes feel higher and urgency becomes even more dangerous. You hear leaders say, we must act before it's too late. There's no time for debate. We have hours, not days. These phrases are often used during crises, real or imagined, and they're powerful because fear and urgency go hand in hand. People will support policies they don't fully understand, back leaders they don't entirely trust, or sign away rights they never thought they'd surrender if they're told the threat is immediate. But here's the dark truth. Emergency powers often outlive the emergency. Laws rushed through under pressure are rarely repealed. Decisions made in panic are rarely re-examined. And the cost of those quick decisions can stretch on for decades. Because what you do in urgency becomes part of the structure. And then there are the fear campaigns designed not to inform you, but to overwhelm you. This threat is at our doorstep. If we don't act now, we're doomed. These phrases play like sirens. And in sirens, we run at question. These campaigns want you to believe that delay equals destruction, that reflection is dangerous, that doubt is betrayal. So you don't ask, is this true? You ask, what should I do right now? And that question makes you easy to control. What's frightening about urgency is not just that it works, it's that it works quietly. You don't notice it until it's already guiding your behavior. You buy the thing, you sign the petition, you support the measure. Not because you understood it, not because you chose it freely, but because you didn't want to miss out. You didn't want to wait. You felt like you couldn't wait. That's not consent. That's compliance under pressure. So how do you defend yourself against something that bypasses your logic? The first step is to notice it, to recognize the feeling, that sudden inner rush, the compulsion to act fast. When you feel that spike pause, don't act from it. Watch it. Sit with it. Ask yourself, is this urgency real or is it being manufactured? Would I still make this choice if I had 24 hours to think? What happens if I walk away right now and revisit this tomorrow? Because the truth is, real opportunities don't vanish in minutes. Real decisions deserve time. Real empowerment comes from clarity, not speed. Urgency should be based on actual time constraints, not artificial pressure. And if someone is trying to force your timeline, it usually means they benefit from you not thinking things through. Also consider the source of the urgency. Who's telling you to act now? What do they gain from your rush? Often, the people applying the pressure are the ones holding the power. They want a reaction, not a response. They want obedience, not understanding. And urgency is their tool. In a democratic system, urgency manipulation is particularly dangerous. Democracy relies on deliberation, on open debate, on informed consent. But when fear and time pressure are introduced into that space, democracy bends. People vote based on emotion, not reason. Laws are passed with little scrutiny. And worst of all, law's power expands during a so-called emergency. It rarely contracts when the emergency ends. We've seen this pattern across history. Rapid responses to crises lead to surveillance, censorship, control, and those responses don't fade. They become part of the system, permanent, quiet, unquestioned. So if you want to resist manipulation, you don't need to become cynical. You don't need to fight every message. You just need to do the one thing urgency tries to steal from you: pause. Just long enough to breathe, to think, to ask the hard questions. This doesn't make you slow, it makes you deliberate. And that's powerful. Because in the fog of urgency, people follow the loudest voice, the fastest talker, the biggest threat. But in that same fog, the person who can stand still, who can wait, who can see clearly, that person can change the outcome. That person is not a follower. That person becomes the center of gravity, the calm in the storm. So next time you see that countdown timer ticking away, let it tick. Next time a voice says act now or lose everything, ask what they are afraid you'll discover if you don't act. Because truth does not fear your patience, only lies do. And now that we've seen how urgency manipulates your timing, let's explore how small steps can manipulate your identity, how you can be gently walked into compliance without ever realizing you've moved. This is the foot in the door techniquea method that doesn't scare you into action, but invites you slowly, gently, into saying yes until you forget how to say no. Foot in the door technique. It starts with something small, a tiny request, a polite favor, something that feels easy, harmless, barely worth thinking about. Can you sign this petition? Mind filling out a short survey? Would you like to try a free sample? And you say yes, why not? It feels good to help. It costs you nothing. It might even make you feel a little virtuous. But what just happened is the beginning of one of the most enduring and quietly powerful psychological tools of influence, the foot in the door technique. It doesn't look like manipulation. In fact, it often looks like kindness, like mutual understanding, like harmless participation. But under the surface, something else is happening. This method is built on a deep truth about human nature. We crave consistency. We like to feel that our actions align with our beliefs, that we are logical, dependable, and stable in our choices. Once we say yes to something, especially publicly or even just to ourselves, we want to remain true to that yes. We want to avoid cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable feeling when our actions and thoughts no longer match. So, when the second request comes bigger, more involved, slightly more demanding, we're far more likely to agree. Not because it makes sense on its own, but because it matches the story we've already begun telling ourselves. I'm someone who supports this. I already agreed once. Why? Stop now. This is how the foot in the door technique works. It doesn't need force. It doesn't rely on pressure. It only needs one thing: your agreement. Just once. Because that first yes is the gateway. It softens your boundaries. It rewrites your self-image. It lays the foundation for the next step, and the next, and the next. Over time, what began as a single, harmless agreement can evolve into full compliance, into support, behavior, or beliefs that you never would have consciously chosen all at once. You've seen this in action before. Think about tech companies. They start with a simple prompt. Enter your email to continue. You do it, no harm done. Then they ask for access to your location. You pause, but okay, sure. It helps with features, right? Then it's your contacts, your camera, your face, your biometric data, your time, your loyalty. And each time you say yes. Because the step before didn't feel like a big deal. Because you're already in. You're already someone who uses this app, someone who shares, someone who agrees. The steps feel small, logical, until one day you look back and realize how far you've traveled from your original comfort zone. And you didn't jump, you walked. This tactic is also used in politics, religion, marketing, social movements, even relationships. At first, it might just be a pledge, a sticker, a post, a handshake, something symbolic. But then comes a request for money, for support, for action. And because you're already connected, already invested, already part of something, you agree. It's easier than pulling back. Saying no now feels disloyal, inconsistent, even wrong. The system doesn't need to push you, just keeps inviting you, step by step. Because every yes makes the next one easier. And the most dangerous part, you feel like it's your idea. That's what makes the foot in the door so powerful. It doesn't feel like manipulation. There's no obvious pressure, no threats, no bait and switch. Each decision along the way seems rational. Each request makes sense within the context of your previous yes. And so, little by little, your resistance erodes. You begin to shape your identity around these choices. I'm someone who supports this cause. I'm someone who always says yes to friends. I'm loyal. I'm consistent. And eventually, you may find yourself doing things you once swore you'd never do not because you were tricked, but because you were trained. This is how trust is manipulated, how freedoms are lost, not in one dramatic moment, but in a series of small, reasonable steps. And because each individual step feels logical, you rarely stop to question the direction. You might not even realize that you've been led. You might think you've been walking freely when in fact, the path has been carefully built around your past agreements. You're not being dragged. You're being guided gently, quietly, through your own willingness to be consistent. So what do you do in the face of this? How do you protect yourself from a technique that relies on your best intentions, your helpfulness, your loyalty, your sense of logic? The answer is not to never say yes. It's not to become paranoid or cynical. Instead, it's about building awareness. After every yes, take a moment to reflect. Ask yourself, do I still agree with where this is going? If I saw the full picture from the start, would I still have said yes? These questions pull you back into perspective. They help you stay grounded in your own values rather than being swept along by momentum. It's also important to give yourself permission to say no, even after you've said yes. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to pause and reassess. You are allowed to protect your boundaries. Just because you agreed to step 1 doesn't mean you owe anyone steps 2, 3, or 10. Saying no now isn't betrayal, it's wisdom. It's remembering that integrity isn't just about staying consistent with your past, it's about staying true to your present. And perhaps most critically, don't confuse gradualism with safety. Just because something moves slowly doesn't mean it's harmless. In fact, the slowness is often the point. The smaller the step, the less likely you are to resist. But small steps can lead to massive changes. Harmless beginnings can lead to harmful ends. That's why it's essential to notice the pattern, not just the pieces. The foot in the door is a technique designed to make you forget that you ever had a line, that you ever had a limit. It blurs the edges until you can't tell where your yes ends and someone else's agenda begins. But now that you know how it works, you can choose differently. You can say yes with awareness and no with confidence. Because influence doesn't always arrive as a forset, often arrives as a favor. And freedom isn't lost all at once. It slips away in tiny increments, wrapped in politeness, disguised as progress. Until one day, you look around and realize you're somewhere you never intended to be in, you can't remember how you got there. So ask the hard questions, sit in the discomfort, break the rhythm. Not every step forward is progress. Not every yes is right. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is pause. Reclaim your thought, reclaim your choice. And now, as we've explored how people use your need for consistency to lead you down a quiet path of compliance, we turn to the opposite side of the psychological coin. What happens when they start big in purpose? When they lead not with subtlety, but with shock? When the first ask is outrageous, and the second one by comparison suddenly feels so reasonable, so fair, that you forget to even question it? That next technique is just as manipulative, just as deliberate. It's called the door in the face technique. Door in the face technique. Imagine this. Someone approaches you with a massive, unreasonable request. something way outside your comfort zone. Can you donate $10,000 today? Will you sign this extreme policy proposal? Would you commit to a year-long subscription right now? Your instinctive answer is no. Of course not. It's too much, too fast, too intense. You feel firm and justified in your refusal. But then just as you're settling into that confident no, they come back with a second request. Smaller, milder, more reasonable. Okay, how about $100 instead? Then can we just agree on this smaller policy? How about a 3-month trial instead of the full year? And suddenly, without quite knowing why, you say yes. Not because you've changed your mind, not because you've thought it through, but because the second request feels better by comparison. That shift-swift, psychological, and effective is called the door-in-the-face technique. At its core, this is a classic manipulation tactic, one that plays directly on your emotions, your sense of fairness, and your subconscious desire to reciprocate. The way it works is clever. The first request is never the real goal. It's bait. It's meant to be refused. In fact, it's designed to fail. That big, outrageous ask, it was the setup. What the manipulator really wants is your agreement to the second, smaller ask, which now seems completely reasonable in contrast. But here's the twist. If they had started with that second request, you might have said no. Because when evaluated on its own, the smaller request might still be unreasonable, manipulative, or simply not in your best interest. But when you're coming down from the larger ask, it feels like a relief, a compromise, a gesture of goodwill you feel compelled to return. This tactic is used everywhere. Politicians do it all the time. They introduce a wildly extreme version of a bill or policy, fully expecting backlash. Protests follow, public opinion erupts. Then, after the chaos, they come back with a more moderate version. The public, exhausted and relieved, agrees. But that compromise was the real goal all along. The extreme version was never intended to pass it, was there to make the final proposal look tame. Yet, if that same final version had been introduced first, it would have faced resistance too. The only reason it feels acceptable now is because your expectations were manipulated. Marketers and retailers use it constantly. Think about when you walk into a store and a salesperson first shows you the premium $3,000 product. You balk, you laugh, you shake your head, but now they lead you to a $1,000 model. Suddenly, it doesn't seem so bad. It feels like a deal. You didn't plan to spend that much, but compared to the initial shock, it feels almost affordable. The contrast makes the price feel justified. But this is illusion. This is framing. It's not that the $1,000 product is cheap, it's just been made to look that way. Charities and influencers use it as well. A fundraising email might first ask you to consider sponsoring a family for an entire year. When you decline, they come back with, could you at least help with just 1 month? It's hard to say no now because you feel like they compromise. You feel like you owe something. You feel like the burden has been shared. But again, this is a setup, a softened landing pad for a decision you didn't plan to make. Why does this work so well? Because it taps into the psychology of reciprocity and fairness. Humans are wired to return favors. If someone seems to give up something, if they appear to be flexible or compromising, we feel the pressure to respond in kind. They came down, we think. Now it's my turn. But the truth is, there was no real concession. It was all part of the plan. What you're experiencing isn't mutual understanding. It's a carefully constructed sequence designed to steer you toward yes. This effect also works because of what's called anchoring. Your brain sets a reference point, the first number, idea, or proposal becomes the mental anchor. Everything that follows is judged in relation to it. So when the first request is extreme, it shifts your internal scale. It distorts your sense of value and reason. The second offer benefits from that distortion. It slips in as the reasonable option, even if it wouldn't seem that way in any other context. But manipulation doesn't need to be dramatic to be dangerous. Often, it's quiet, frictionless. It doesn't rely on confrontation. It relies on comparison. You're not being yelled at or coerced. You're being gently redirected, nudged, framed. And that's what makes it so hard to spot and even harder to resist. So what can you do when you feel this happening? You pause. You slow the moment down. You don't rush into the smaller offer just because it feels better than the first one. Instead, you ask yourself, was that first offer real or just a setup? And would I have agreed to this second request if it had been the only one presented? These are powerful questions. They pull you out of the trap. They give your brain time to reset, to reevaluate, to reclaim clarity. Because every decision deserves to be made on its own merit, not in the shadow of something deliberately outrageous. And if you realize that you're being manipulated, you have the right to walk away entirely. Not to negotiate, not to meet halfway, but to disengage. Because your agreement should never be based on pressure, guilt, or comparison. It should come from genuine understanding and freedom. Manipulation, when done well, doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like your idea. That's why it's so effective. And that's why awareness is everything. This technique, the door in the face, is closely related to another one that takes things even further. It starts by getting your agreement, then changes the terms after you're already committed. It relies not just on your sense of fairness, but on your reluctance to back out. Coming up next, we explore low balinga tactic designed to wear you down slowly, after you've already said yes. Low balling. You're offered something tempting, a deal, a promise, a golden opportunity. It sounds just right, like a perfect fit. And in that moment, you agree. You feel lucky, even smart, for saying yes so quickly. But then, slowly and quietly, the terms begin to change. Not in a dramatic way, but just enough to make you pause. The discount isn't quite as big as you thought. The contract has more fine print. The opportunity suddenly includes new conditions. But now, you're already in. You've emotionally committed. You've pictured yourself with the reward. You've told people about it. You've begun the process. And so reluctantly, maybe even without realizing it, you accept the new terms. That's the trap of lowballing, a manipulation technique that doesn't force you into a decision, but gently guides you into one, and then changes the ground beneath your feet. It's common in marketing, politics, and personal relationships. First comes the attractive offer price, too low, a promise too bright, an opportunity too rare. It's bait. And once you bite, the switch happens. You're told there's a catch, there's a fee, there's a condition you didn't see before. But the decision has already wrapped around your emotions. Your mind says, I've come this far. Your heart says, I don't want to lose this. And so you stay. Not because the new terms are fair, but because you feel too committed to turn around. Lowballing works because of two psychological forces. The first is commitment. We want to be consistent with our earlier decisions. Saying no now feels like betraying our past selves. The second is loss aversion. We'd rather accept something worse than risk losing something we almost had. The fear of missing out becomes stronger than the instinct to walk away, so we rationalize, we adapt. We tell ourselves it's not so bad. And slowly, deal by deal, moment by moment, we become people who accept less than we deserve. Not because we were tricked once, but because we got used to the trick. That's the quiet danger of lowballing. It doesn't con you with foresight, softens you over time. So how do you break the cycle? You give yourself the radical freedom to walk away. Even after saying yes, even after starting, even after investing time and energy, you pause and ask, if this were the offer from the beginning, would I have said yes? If the answer is no, then you are allowed to say no now. Respect, whether in business or love or politics, doesn't just honor your obedience, it honors your clarity. Your ability to change your mind when new facts appear. That is strength, not weakness. And as we pull away from the slow erosion of lowballing, we step into another form of manipulation known that doesn't work by changing the terms, but by changing your sense of self through the crowd around you. When your need to belong becomes the system's favorite lever. Next, we explore the bandwagon effect. Bandwagon effect manipulation. Everyone's doing it. Everyone's saying it. Everyone's sharing it. And in the flood of voices, likes, and repetition, you suddenly feel the pull subtle but powerful that maybe you should too. That's the bandwagon effect, a deeply ingrained instinct rooted in our evolutionary past. Humans are social by design. In ancient times, being part of the group meant survival. To stand alone was to be vulnerable, to risk danger. That instinct hasn't left use, it's just been repurposed. Now, instead of protecting us from predators, it pushes us toward whatever the majority is doing. And when this instinct is manipulated, it becomes a tool of persuasion so effective it barely needs explanation. Marketers don't just promote a product, they promote popularity. They use phrases like, #1 bestseller, over 1 million sold, or everyone's switching to this brand, not necessarily because it's true, but because it works. It sends a message that bypasses logic and lands straight in your subconscious. If so many others are doing it, it must be good. But the message goes deeper than "this is good." It's really saying, you'll be left behind if you don't join in. Politicians use this tactic: too early poll numbers, endorsements, crowd sizes all choreographed to create an illusion of dominance, of inevitability. They want you to believe that a certain view is already winning, already accepted, already the majority. And when that illusion is strong enough, most people stop questioning. They just go along. Because it's easier to clap with the crowd than to sit silently in doubt. It's easier to retweet what everyone else is saying than to say something uncertain. It's easier to belong. That's the quiet power of the bandwagon. It doesn't require force. It just needs momentum. A rolling train of groupthink where disagreement feels like social exile. So what do? You step back. You quiet the noise. You ask yourself, do I actually believe this? Or am I agreeing because I don't want to be the only one who doesn't? You ask, would I still think this way if no one else was cheering? Because real conviction comes not from consensus, but from clarity. And truth isn't determined by applause. It lives outside the crowd, in the moments of solitude where you think for yourself. And that kind of thinking is rare because it's uncomfortable, but it's also free. And just as the bandwagon effect pulls you toward the crowd, there's another trick waiting, one that makes you feel like something essential is slipping through your fingers unless you act now. Next, we explore how that the fear of missing out, is used to rush your decisions before you're truly ready. This is creating a sense of scarcity. Creating a sense of scarcity, only 3 left in stock. Final hours. Last chance. These phrases might seem harmless, but they tap into something ancient and powerful in the human brain. The fear of missing out, of being left behind, of losing access to something important. That tiny jolt of anxiety you feel, the quickened breath, the need to act isn't just marketing success, it's the weaponization of scarcity. At its core, scarcity triggers survival instincts. When we think something is rare, we believe it must be valuable. When it seems to be vanishing, we assume we must grab it before it's gone. And so, scarcity becomes one of the most effective tools for manipulation, not when it's real, but when it's created. Artificial scarcity is everywhere now. Websites display fake countdowns that reset each time you refresh. Products are said to be almost gone when the warehouse is full. Tickets are promoted as nearly sold out to boost urgency, even if half the venue is empty. These tactics aren't about truth. They're about pressure. They work because they bypass logic and target emotion. Scarcity narrows your thinking. It whispers that you don't have time, that you'll regret waiting, that others are already ahead of you. And in that urgency, critical thinking disappears. You don't evaluate, you act. You buy, you agree, you click. And this isn't just a marketing trick. It bleeds into politics, into media, into how we're persuaded to support things we barely understand. Urgency becomes a cloak for fear. And fear, when rushed, starts to feel like rationality. This is our only chance. If we don't act now, it's too late. These are the rallying cries of manipulated urgency. And in the crowd of people panicking beside you, it's easy to panic too. It's easy to mistake movement for meaning, noise for necessity. But that's when mistakes happen. That's when systems gain power, because people aren't thinking clearly, they're reacting. So how do you resist? You pause. You step outside the countdown. You breathe and ask, is this really limited? Or am I being told it is? You ask, would I still want this if I had all the time in the world to consider? These questions bring space, and space brings clarity, because urgency should never be forced. It should arise naturally, from truth, not from tactics. Time is not a luxury, it is your right. And when someone tries to take it from you, it's not because they want to help you act fast, it's because they don't want you to think. And now, we turn to something even deeper than fear. What happens when your own craving for emotional resolution is used to trap you in a false sense of ending? When closure becomes the bait and manipulation hides in the calm that follows. Exploiting the need for closure, humans are wired to crave resolution. It's in our nature to want things tied up, explained, concluded. We look for endings the way we look for landmarks in a storm something to tell us where we are and that it's finally over. This desire for closure isn't weakness, it's deeply human. But because it's so strong, it can be used against us. When something terrible happens, a crisis, a disaster, a mystery, the first instinct isn't always to understand, it's to feel finished, to stop the spinning uncertainty. And so, when a system steps in with quick answers, neat conclusions, and easy villains, we often accept them. Not because they're true, but because they feel complete. The narrative says, here's what caused it, here's who did it, here's how we'll fix it. And we breathe out, not because the chaos is resolved, but because the tension in our minds temporarily is. That's the trap. When closure is offered too soon, too simply, it becomes a kind of sedative. It stops us from asking harder questions, from staying with the discomfort of ambiguity. We trade curiosity for calm and complexity for certainty. And in doing so, we make ourselves easier to lead, to pacify, to deceive. A government might offer one scapegoat. A media outlet might highlight a single enemy. A corporation might propose one product as the fix to all our fears. And the public, overwhelmed and aching for a sense of resolution, often accepts it, grateful to feel settled. But real life is rarely that clean. Injustice isn't always swift. Truth isn't always digestible. And not every wound heals with a single answer. Closure, when it's given instead of earned, becomes manipulation. It trains us to stop thinking the moment we're comforted. It teaches us to accept tidy lies rather than wrestle with messy truths. And so the only way to break the spell is to stay uncomfortable just a little longer. To notice the answers that feel too fast, too neat. To ask, who benefits from this version of the story? And is this the truth or just the ending I was told to believe? Real understanding takes time. Real justice demands patience. And real closure, if it ever comes, is something we must work for, not simply receive. Because anything given too quickly might not be resolution at all, but control wrapped in a bow. Micromanipulation. Not all forms of control announce themselves. Some slip quietly into the background, so small and so familiar that you hardly notice them at all. That's the danger of micromanipulation. It isn't about grand speeches or overt coercion. It's about the almost invisible, well-timed sigh. A glance that lingers just long enough, the way someone pauses after your words, or subtly changes their tone when they say your name. These are not accidents. They are strategies. A compliment that seems harmless but shifts your self-image just a little. A like that doesn't appear on your post. A word choice that makes you feel heard or diminished. These are the tools of subtle influence, and they are everywhere. In conversations, in relationships, in leadership, in social systems. The reason they work so well is because they don't set off alarms. They bypass your defenses. There's no confrontation to resist. Instead, you are gently guided, softened, shifted from confidence to self-doubt, from clarity to confusion, from agency to quiet compliance. This is how control hides in kindness, how manipulation wears the face of care. And because these acts are so small, you don't question them. You don't even realize they're shaping you. That's what makes them dangerous, not their size, but their silence. But there's a way to break the spell. You start by noticing the texture of communication, not just what is said, but how it is said. You tune in to the discomfort that rises for no obvious reason. You ask yourself, why do I feel hesitant now? Why did I feel bad for setting a boundary? Because your body will sense manipulation before your mind can name it. And once you name it, its power begins to unravel. Awareness is the antidote to subtle control. It doesn't always need confrontation. Sometimes it only needs recognition. And as you build this awareness, you start to protect your inner space. You no longer absorb every cue as truth. You begin to separate the signal from the static. And that, quietly, is freedom. But even as we learn to catch these invisible threads of influence, there's another trap, waiting, one rooted not in subtle nudges, but in unfinished emotions. One that keeps you circling the same unresolved stories, searching for peace that never arrives. And so, we return to a deeper cognitive glitch, the one we never quite escape, the Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect is a quiet force that tugs at the edges of your thoughts, making you remember the things that were never finished, the task you left incomplete, the conversation that ended mid-sentence, the goodbye that never happened. It stays with you, louder and heavier than the things you've neatly wrapped up. That's the trick of it. The human mind is drawn to the unresolved. It loops, it fixates, it replays. That lingering feeling you get from a cliffhanger in a show, the way your mind returns to an argument left open, the way an unsolved mystery sticks in your thoughts that's not random, it's a known psychological phenomenon. And when this tendency is deliberately used against you, it becomes more than just an annoyance. It becomes a tool of control. The system understands this effect. It feeds you stories with no endings, scandals with no consequences, promises with no follow-through. You hear the beginning of something important, but the conclusion never comes. A protest happens, a headline explodes, a leader makes a claim, but the resolution is quietly buried, forgotten, left to fade in the noise. And you, the viewer, the citizen, the participant, you're left in suspense. You keep checking, keep scrolling, keep wondering. You stay emotionally invested because your brain wants closure. It needs it. But while you're busy chasing that elusive ending, power moves forward uninterrupted, unchallenged. The tactic works not by informing you, but by leaving you mentally cluttered. You're always on edge, always seeking the next update, always waiting to feel done, but that moment never comes. And so, without realizing it, you remain in systems that hurt you, jobs that drain you, relationships that confuse you, simply because your brain whispers, maybe this time I'll get the closure I've been waiting for. But here's the hard truth. Sometimes, closure is not on its way. Sometimes, the door is left open on purpose. It's a trap, a loop, a hook, and the only way out is to break the cycle yourself. You can say, this story didn't end, and maybe it never will, but I'm allowed to move forward anyway. You don't need the apology that never came. You don't need the perfect goodbye. You don't need the final episode that ties it all together. You need peace. And peace, more often than not, comes not from completion, but from release. From letting go of the need to understand everything. From choosing presence over pursuit. From stepping out of the loop. And now, as the reflection nears its end, we prepare for the greatest trick of all, the one illusion that towers above the rest. The one control tactic so deeply embedded, you almost don't see it until it's already passed through you. Mind control. This spoken word reflection explores the unsettling truth that modern mind control isn't the science fiction fantasy we often imagine. It's not about machines, chips, or hypnotists swinging pocket watches. It's about something far more ordinary and far more dangerous. Real mind control is subtle, quiet, and deeply human. It lives in repetition, in the way an idea becomes truth simply because we've heard it enough times. It's hidden in framing how a story is told, what's emphasized, what's left out. It rewards us with likes, shares, and applause when we say the right thing, and punishes us with silence, shame, or outrage when we don't. This kind of influence doesn't feel like control because it's built into our everyday lives through our feeds, our conversations, our choices. It engineers consent without us even realizing it. Over time, we give 1,000 little yeses without thinking. We buy the product, click the link, repeat the headline, adopt the fear, and the most powerful kind of control is the one that convinces us we've never been controlled at all. We call our conditioned choices freedom. We pick a side and defend it as our own. But when we pause and look at the pattern show, our beliefs echo the narratives we've been fed, how our fears were handed to us gradually, how our identity feels curated rather than chosen. It becomes clear that something else has been at work. It's not paranoia to notice this. It's design. But within that realization is a door. Because awareness, even the smallest spark of it, breaks the illusion. You don't need to know every trick or fight every battle. You only need to stop for a moment and ask, is this thought mine? That question is a kind of rebellion. It's a reclamation of the self. Because no matter how many strings have been tied to your thoughts, your limbs, your emotions, your mind is still your own. You are not a product, not a follower, not a number in a system. You are a thinker. And thinkers can be distracted, manipulated, misled, but they can't be truly controlled unless they give up the act of thinking. This piece ends with a powerful affirmation. You walked through the maze, you saw the design, and now you rest not as a pawn, but as a watcher. Still, awake, free,